But then I was like, no, no, you can't carry that on for 2 hours. You should
No,
just.
no, no. Speaking of, hello and welcome to Indiepocalypse Radio. This is not Andrew's second time where he may remember to hit record this time. This is the regular intro, like he always does. Fresh off the presses, no mistakes, no errors. Got it in 100% all the time. Can you believe that that guest was talking before I asked them to? The gall of these people to speak before being introduced. This is Indiepocalypse Radio. It's where I do everything 100% professionally every time, and I talk to people as like a co-marketing thing to Indiepocalypse, as a brand booster. I don't know what you call it, but I do it. Now we've got our first guest here, who you may know from the internet and other zine productions such as Choice Beats, and now listen, I'm a kind of guy who knows my way around, and I very much know that it has a subtitle, a very descriptive subtitle, which is the visual novel and interactive fiction zine. It's Willie Electrics. Willie, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. I had a really kick-ass opening line that we didn't record, but I
Yeah,
can't do it again. I'd just be embarrassing.
it would
So,
be embarrassing. That's how I do it. I think we might have got a little bit of it in in the
but yeah,
background.
that's fine. Let's just pretend that I didn't waste that and
I'm sorry.
continue.
I'm so sorry that I sacrificed your intro onto the pyre of audio mistakes. But whatever, we're here now. We're recording. We're getting
Yeah, glad to
everything
be here.
ready.
Thanks for having me. I actually have listened to every episode of this show in
Super
preparation.
user.
That's that's not true. I listened to a couple of them though, so I definitely would make sure I didn't say anything embarrassing like get on here and not talk about what we're supposed to talk about or any of that.
Yes, as we know, Indie Apocalypse Radio is a strict by the numbers. I mean, people have accused us of having a script on this show,
Got it
and
right in front of me.
I, what I was going to say is those accusations were false because no guest would ever admit to having the script that I Dropboxed them earlier. Who would write in so much stammering? It seems unprofessional. But let's get to the important part. The
All right.
number one question we got to ask, which is, how did you hear about Indiepocalypse?
Um, I don't know. This is feels kind of loaded. I don't know if I have a good answer for it. I probably ended up just following you on Twitter or something basic. But
Yeah.
if you want me to like make up something good,
No,
hit me
no,
at the end of the show
no. I
with the
just want the
same question.
truth.
Okay. Yeah, I probably just stumbled upon you on Twitter that, the algorithm matched us up.
Yeah, as it's want to do. Now, people talk a lot about this so-called algorithm, but they also talk a lot about how I can't believe Twitter's switching off of latest tweets. And folks, you can only choose one of them. Which one? Which one is it? Do you obey the algorithm or do you use latest tweets? You can't complain about both.
I don't actually know how Twitter works, so I don't know what you're talking about.
There's a button that says "Give me chronologically, please," because I don't want to overthink this thing. I just want to get the info as it comes down to me, which is how I live my life.
What's the other button do?
Yeah, that's the algorithm, you know.
I probably use the algorithm because it's probably on by default, don't I?
Yes, I think that's the thing they want you to use because then they can probably better serve you content. That's how you get the stuff that you get mad at. So then you can quote retweet it too and get mad at it, and then it just like spreads, you know.
Um, I've been getting a lot of topics on there that are like have nothing to do with me. Like it'll be like topic bodybuilding, and I'm like, I don't even
That
like.
sounds like the situation where you're not engaging enough because I feel like I get that on like what was it? I feel like it might have been like when I was still using Facebook, and it was like I would just like block everything. Had no friends. I basically use it
Yeah,
for. I basically use it as, like, to talk to like six people in a secret group. So it was like, how about this? So like, no, block. I'm not participating.
yeah, I've been kind of doing that. Like I just X out of every one, and I'm like, eventually I'll have X'd out of all of them, and then
Yes, you
we'll
have.
like,
You
well,
eventually blocked every advertiser on Twitter.
yeah, I'm not like a Twitter power user. I don't even.
I wouldn't
You
encourage
guys,
anyone to be.
yeah, I don't even know Any engagement I get on there is just luck. It's just luck.
Yeah, I occasionally like, do you not put links in the promo thing? But then sometimes I'm like, when people don't put links in it, I don't want to click through the second thing. I can't be bothered.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, see that's I don't even know enough to know that that was a debate. I'm like, you always
Yeah,
put links in, right?
yeah. I mean, supposedly you don't, but I feel like that's partially people are just deluding themselves into thinking this has got to work. This has got to work. Like I get the underlying logic because people posting spam will post just links, but
Yeah, but I guess I don't like in my mind I'm like nobody cares enough about my tweet to like click on the little word bubble and see the links.
yes, that's
Like
I'm that person who can't be bothered 90% of the time to be like, well, I'm not gonna go to this. I'm not gonna go 2 tweets deep to find out your link unless I just like genuinely care already. But or I have to like share something. That's why I usually try to share them. Anyway, this let's listen. Social media is no fun.
yeah, let's get off this shit. Let's move
It's
on.
it's a necessity of the medium, I guess, or like it is a necessity. We just let it be. Like the game developers conference. It's not really important. We just decided that it is when we really don't have to care about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I my most popular game I made, Void Pyramid, which I'm like living in the shadow of
Yeah.
for decades, and everybody just wants to talk to me about that, and I'm kind of like, yo, I moved on. But that one, I got all everybody who played that. I didn't even have social media back then. And it's still my most popular game, so I'm starting to be like, this has nothing to do with how much I post on the internet or any promotion effort I do. It's there's some other force at work, you know?
Yeah. Because I mean, when you think about it, art existed before Twitter did,
Yeah.
and people got popular even before that.
Yeah, but now I'm struggling to think of how they did that.
They, I don't know. I feel like no, we got caught. We got caught in the vortex of talking about it again. But I was gonna say it feels like
Yeah.
you don't
Let's,
actually need to, but people, it's all FOMO. It's FOMO all the way down, you know. So you can't compete with it anymore. You just gotta like if only there was like a zine that I could read about and read a lot of reviews, and that's how I found out about like, say for instance, forms of interactive fiction, visual novels.
that's I was thinking, I was like, how did people know about things before Twitter? And I was like, maybe this is zines,
Yeah,
but
maybe you are doing exactly that.
maybe this is what zines are.
Yeah,
Um, I don't even know the difference between a zine and a magazine, so I don't know if I don't know if I'm really have the authority to really contribute to a serious
I
zine
think
conversation.
it may be length or it may just be vibe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think that a magazine assumes that somebody besides you is publishing it, and a
Yes.
zine assumes that you published it.
Yeah, maybe it has to do with like layout and assumption. I do not know it's much like that one guy once said about pornography. I know it's a zine when I see it, you know?
This somebody in the chat says the difference between a zine and a magazine is glossiness, which I don't know if that's true, but I believe that this person said it with enough authority that I'll roll with that.
I'll believe it. Like a nice glossy cover. Yeah, that's a kind of paper that I wouldn't have in my house, you know?
Yeah, if it's paper that doesn't fit in the photocopier, it's a magazine.
Yes,
Otherwise, it's a zine.
precisely. That's
Um,
yeah. How rigidly are you adhering to CMYK, or do you just kind of like, well, this is the image they sent me. I guess I'm going to put it in and hope for the best.
Uh, yeah, this is something that's kind of interesting to me is I feel like self-publishing is like really blowing up with print on demand stuff now, and I
Yeah,
feel like the barriers to like getting a book in somebody's hands, like a physical object, had been like smashed down,
yeah.
and it's
No,
kind of
I did that like I don't want to do the math, but probably over a decade ago for a friend's comic, and I self-published it, did print on demand stuff. I laid out the books, and you just buy them. You just buy them and print them. You don't have to. You don't even have to do crowdfunding. I mean,
right.
the profit margin sucks, but
Yeah, and plus, good luck promoting it. But the I agree with you. Anything that doesn't require you to crowdfund is like great. That we should always move towards that.
Right, right. You can have both options, you know.
Yeah.
But like sometimes you don't have enough time in the day to, for instance, or space in your house for like a pallet worth of books.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, you gotta if you're gonna do traditional printing, you have to print in bulk, whether that's 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 or
Yeah.
whatever. Some you gotta print it, and who's got money for that? And then you're shipping it out yourself, and
Right. And but I from a studio apartment, anyone can, just do print on demand.
yeah, it's pretty sweet. Thank God for that.
Yeah. And there's so many of them. There's like, and when one collapses, when one does a thing we don't like, you can just move on to a different one, you know? The old.
Yeah, so Indiepocalypse, it's never had a physical component, right? It's all
No,
digital.
there are.
Okay, what's
I
that
print
like?
I print one every month for myself, and all of my hashtag ad $25 patrons get physical copies.
Yo, this was not like a setup. Like I didn't
No, no, it
pop this
wasn't.
in. Okay, this was legit. I didn't know.
There are some people who just print that out on their own home, which is like true to the spirit of the zine.
Yeah, that is tight.
Because I
So
just give, cause,
you formatted it so it can be printed then.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the file that I print is the file you get when you buy it.
That's great.
So if you went down, if you like had a printer in your house, or you went down to the Staples or something, you could just like, here's the file. Do the Adobe Reader thing where it says print booklet, and then it just prints it for you.
That's great. That's awesome. I don't think Choice Beat would work like that because it's an 8.5 by 11 page, but like the art goes out to the margins, and like you would have to. There'd be like a bunch of bleed issues just printed
Yeah.
on a regular printer. You would, it wouldn't work. It would never
I
work.
generally try to, if people are good enough about not printing like important art all the way to the margins, and I usually try to avoid bleed issues myself with like text, but sometimes I also screw that up because
Yeah,
it's 90%, like 99% of it is a PDF, which it doesn't matter for.
right.
Also,
Exactly. That's who's mostly reading it.
and then also, generally speaking, you have to care about like your page count, unless you're doing a I forget what the number, what the kind of printing is, but you generally your pages have to be divisible by 4 in order for you to be able to do saddle stitching and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I only know that because I've done some printing on Drive Through RPG, who uses Lightning Source,
Yeah,
and I think they do primarily not saddle stitching, but
same
some
idea.
other. Yeah, same thing.
Yeah, divisible page counts. You can't print 22 pages in a book because you don't have enough pages.
Yeah,
Some of
although then
them,
they just stuff blank ones in the back, so
yeah,
okay.
just throw a bunch of
Anyway.
junk. But yeah, it's a fun thing. I have, because I mean originally, this is why I often downplay my influence. But when I see someone has like a little bonus thing, like a zine, or like the Tiny Games bundle had like playing cards, I go, yeah, I know where you got that idea from
Wait,
because
are you saying that's you? That's
that
your idea?
yeah, I think any bonus is like very clearly coming from Indiepocalypse because I don't think a zine is like the natural endpoint to like making a game bundle.
Yeah. All right. That's cool.
Mostly because like a physical component exists because how can I as for a way for me to demo it at shows,
What shows do you go to?
just like local game shows, or like local art, like what's the word I'm looking for, flea markets and things like that.
Okay. Um, Interesting.
Because like how, for instance, I knew from the very first issue it would be difficult to demo 10 games, but now to demo like 280 games.
W- So I'm just trying to like, I'm like, okay, you must live in a metropolitan
Nope,
area.
no. But I mean, I live on the East Coast, I live in New England, so it's like it's small enough that you can be like hours from multiple metropolitan areas.
Yeah, okay. That's so yeah, any case, whether you live in a city or not, you live in a relatively densely populated area where you have access to that stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
relatively speaking. I mean, if you're in like the South or the Midwest or the West Coast, there's a lot of room to be like, I don't live in near anything.
Yeah, agreed. You can drive. I live in a city, so it's I don't I'm not, I have access to that stuff and I still
Yeah,
don't do it. So
I very rarely I go. It's and then also Indiepocalypse launched on the cusp of COVID, so I there was no option to go to any events for a very long time.
so what's like so is like using events to sell Indiepocalypse, is this kind of like something you want to scale up as like this is the future of the zine?
That
Or
is
is it
a hopeful way of like doing. Yeah, I mean that's also why I made my consignment shop.
yeah, that's the postcard thing, right?
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
as a way of like, well, I'm going to events and like I also think that people should sell things at event game developers, whatever that means. If you know what I'm talking about on Twitter,
I
just
just
discourse.
vaguely. Yeah, I don't know. That's a bit of an eye roller, the whole thing.
Yeah, I feel like something I've noticed, and is that very few people who I follow because they contribute to the zine ever engage in online games discourse, and I wonder if it's just like the same kind of like obnoxious industry types, and people are like no, and then like people are like, oh, I actually don't care about it because it's so ridiculous. Like, who cares?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people. Yeah, exactly. It's like industry types, or it's like people that are like have a high. I feel like there's a lot of people that are like not actually in the industry and don't want to be in the industry, but like kind of just are like industry followers, like just
Yeah,
because they're into games and this is the industry is their source of news, and those type of people. That's what this discourse surrounds. Whereas meanwhile, a lot of people who are like artists and game creators are just like they're kind of like they can't even be bothered to post about games they've made because they don't care or they're too busy making games and they're like totally checked out. Is I
yeah.
think a lot an archetype I think is common, but I could be wrong.
No, that's what I can. That's what I've noticed increasingly as I've noticed like who talks about these things, and more importantly, I guess who doesn't, or who treats them like they're ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah,
Because
I could see it.
it does like it is. I mean, people joke about their little calendar of discourse, but it is the same thing over and over again, and it's like it's this maddening cycle, and I don't understand why people contribute. But anyway, who cares? Who cares? So let's talk for a second about. Let's go back to choice beat. So choice beat. So
Okay.
where did the idea for
Okay.
like what as someone who made a zine just randomly what inspires someone to say, well, I'm just going to do this thing, and then what made you do it?
Okay. So I'm like a person that kind of like whenever I see anything, I kind of want to do it. Like whenever
Yeah.
I like go to a movie, I'm like, I'm gonna make a fucking movie.
Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, I've always thought zines were cool, and it's always been like something that like is weighing on me. Where I'm like, I want to make a zine, but like, what about? And then so recently, I'm like, well, the only thing I like know about is gaming because I'm totally obsessed. But I was like, but who want like a gaming zine? Like, you can't. Who cares about gaming in general? Like you
Yeah.
need
Who
specific.
gamers? I
Or
think.
they don't even care. Anyway, so I was like, I need something specific, and recently I kind of noticed that like visual novels and interactive fiction are like a genre that's kind of like in a renaissance right now. I
Yeah.
feel like mobile games are kind of blowing up. Like I think it kind of like started with mobile games. A lot of that is like comes from there. People are playing those. A lot of them are like kind of microtransaction filled where you pay for each little chapter or whatever, or the Choice of Games series, which is pretty popular on mobile. But like I'm like this is like kind of a new medium that's like totally hot, and feel like has like a lot of longevity. It's been around for a while and it's going through a renaissance, and I feel it's really accessible to gamers and non-gamers, as well as like it's easy for people to create because you really just have to write. So I was
Yeah.
like, this is like a highly creative area of gaming right now, and nobody's really talking about, like, you have your visual novel fans that are like mostly kind of like anime and Japanese game
Yeah,
kind of.
and they are passionate fans.
Right. And then you have, like, there's always like the whatever the yearly I interactive fiction competition is, but that's like everybody making games with Inform, like,
Yeah,
parser based.
that's listen, there is a lot of very particulars I'm sure you know the particulars of what is IF and what is not IF.
Yeah, although I take that term and I just say fuck it and use it for
Yes,
everything.
exactly. And I live very close to the home of IF. IF comp I think takes place only like an hour away from me.
Oh, I didn't. Yeah, okay. I didn't even know physically where it.
I believe it is in Boston
Okay. So I
because
guess I feel like all these.
there's a lot of like very foundational IF people around Boston. I believe.
Yeah, like, so that scene's there and visual novels, and like they're all part of like the same, right? Like they're all part of like the same kind of medium, but nobody really recognizes as that. And I'm like,
Yeah,
this is it. This is what zine I can do.
and it's cool
Yeah.
because
So go ahead.
no, I was gonna say it is a thing where I think it also gets very much like painted with a broad brush, from like I guess for lack of a better word, the mainstream of like what a visual novel is. They fall into like I don't know two camps, or like it seems like especially the it seems like they're not taken very seriously often. I suppose.
Sure. I saw an article. I think it was on VN Game Den. Um, that's the site with like the little axolotl mascot. Anyway.
Okay.
Okay. So they had an article. It was something about how, like, and if somebody from there hears that and I fucked this up, I'm sorry, but I remember the spirit of it. Okay.
Yes.
So the spirit of it was is that visual novels are really just used, like, people kind of treat them like parody,
Yeah.
who aren't fans of them treat them like parody. Like, on April 1st, a big game studio will be like, "Oh, we're gonna make a visual novel of this game series," or a dating sim is like kind of mockery of it,
Yeah.
or like that Colonel Sanders
Yes.
dating sim that popped up. Like, I think that people like kind of do it to like mock it, but in my mind, I'm like, yo, it's just words and pictures. You
Yeah.
can do anything with that, Like, so,
Right, or it feels like the kind of like how comics can feel, where it's like here's the comic book version of like which is like this dashed off prequel series or something. It's not a medium of its own. It's a supplementary medium.
right. Yeah. And comics are also just words and pictures, where it's
Yeah.
so like, these are like super powerful mediums that you could do
Yes.
anything with, but, people don't see it like that.
What a coincidence that the words and pictures mediums are getting the short shrift in both situations. There's
Yeah.
something there. Yeah, yeah, it is exactly. It feels like we like I saw someone playing like what's it like? Okay, what did Higurashi? It was some very like foundational what Japanese visual novel, like kinetic style. I forget what it was that has like one of those ones. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I do. Yep.
But he was like, dude, it's just like Doki Doki, and I was like, visual novels were free for a moment from the specter of Hatoful Boyfriend. Are they cursed ones again
Yeah.
by Doki
Yeah,
Doki Literature Club?
for sure. I definitely feel like I actually like TOEFL Boyfriend. I think it's pretty good and pretty
I
entertaining. But
I
I
also
do
don't
feel
think
like,
it is what 90% of people think it is.
yeah, for sure. But it definitely is one that I think people latched onto because they're like, "Oh, how wacky!" And I mean, it
Yeah.
is. It's intentionally wacky, and it has some great surprises in there. But I think that set people's perspective for
Yeah.
visual novels. At least, I should say, people who have gotten them in the last 5 to 10 years, maybe.
Yes, like a very specific like public prefacing of now you're dating this, you're dating the genre of dating things you're not supposed to date.
Uh, yeah, I hadn't really put the genre in those terms, but it's real. It exists.
Yes, yes, I'm dating refrigerators. It's I'm dating. It's that Pro ZD sketch about
I don't
dating appliances.
I don't know that.
He's
So,
he was a prolific sketch Vine sort of guy. He kind of is primarily a voice actor. I think he just put out a video about how he primarily prefers to do voice acting, and sketch stuff was kind of like a side gig. I think he's very funny. think he's got good stuff. But anyway, the point was he did a series of like Chair Senpai and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, and then that kind of spun off into like maybe this is a normal dating sim, but it's not dating pigeons or the fridge, but it's still kind of weird. And
You're right.
like that's where you get stuff like things that I don't even think are weird, but are actually just normal, but people kind of make jokes out of them. Like you have games like Dream Daddy. That's the one where you date like
Yeah.
middle-aged single
Oh,
dads. Or you
isn't it
have
isn't it really funny to date other men?
yeah, and you're kind of like, or like oh middle-aged. Oh man, they're not like
Yeah.
hot model dudes. They're like, and you're kind of like,
They're
yeah, this is
just
kind
kind of like
of
hot
normal.
dads who are still basically hot anime guys, really, when you look at those designs.
Yeah. Or there's one that was called, what was it, Later Daters, where it's like you're in a nursing home and you
Yeah.
date. Although that was pretty sincere. I mean, it
Right.
definitely was about, but like, people are like, dang, how crazy you're dating
Right.
old people. And it's kind
Yeah.
of like,
That's it's the same curse where even if they are like actually sincere, just anything that's whiff of a mildly different concept, you get that impression from people
yeah, for sure.
of
But
like, I can't believe you're dating such and this and that. Wow, it's so weird.
yeah, but hey, if it gets people playing the
Right?
games,
It
who
gets
gives?
money in people's pockets.
Yeah, whatever.
Then they'll go like, I understand it now. I feel for it. I respect it.
Yeah. Although
Except,
I will say, I guess I am a little bit kind of over all so many visual novels having like a romance component to them. Like
yeah,
not everyone is a dating game,
yes,
and not everyone even has romance. But a lot of them, like even ones that are maybe they're not about romance, they have like a little romance element. Which hey, romance is cool. I love romance, so hook it up. But I feel like it feels like sometimes it's a little bit like we have to have this.
right, right,
Yeah,
or like all the ones, most of the ones that people pay attention to are romance visual novels.
right.
The ones that get a focus, like yeah, like you said, like it feels like it's kind of like a necessary part of the genre when it doesn't need to be. I don't know if I've actually played any
That aren't
dating
romance.
sims.
What do you mean?
I'm trying to think of the visual novels. I don't know how many visual novels I play that are dating sims.
Yeah, it's okay. It's tough because, like, in my mind,
You're thinking
I
of
guess
you're thinking of
to people,
Newgrounds. Of
yeah, to people that are really serious about like the genre, I think there is a line between a dating sim
yeah,
and a romance visual novel. I feel like dating sims are stuff like Tokimeki Memorial, which is like
you know,
uh
Kramer's
highly.
epic quest for hentai,
I don't know that
the
one,
important
but
ones. No, you don't know the Newgrounds classics?
I didn't really use new. I'm old enough to use Newgrounds, but I didn't really do it.
Okay.
But yeah, stuff like that. I feel like those are like dating sims are like highly mechanized. They're like kind of like life sims,
Yeah.
but they're romance. But like romance visual novels, I feel like you could make an argument that they're really distinct from dating sims.
Yes,
And
there's a difference between like managing stats and there just being routes.
yeah, I'm glad. Thank you for summarizing that. Yes, I was struggling. Great.
Yeah. Just remember, sim stands for simulation.
Yeah, yeah.
Simulation City. The simulations.
Now I have like a few romance scenes in the visual novel I'm writing right now, and now I'm like, I'm gonna fuck it. I'm taking those out.
Ooh. Well, we are been great to chat with you, but we're gonna take a break soon and get to our next guest. I
Yeah,
hope you'll stick around.
yeah. I will. Let's get the other person in there. They seem cooler anyway.
And
So
hey, don't listen. The year of putting ourselves down is in the past. 2022 is no more self owns. Just they have to come with a paired with a compliment.
okay. I'll
Because
I'll have a compliment by the end
okay,
of
because
the.
that way you're not deprecating yourself. You're staying humble. Let me just make sure I have the right thing queued up. I do. We're gonna go on break. We're gonna play another video because it is, of course, AMV night. And then we'll be back with our next guest. See y'all on the other half of like three and a half minutes, like the proper appropriate length for a song. No more, no less. Goodbye. Hello and welcome back to Indiepocalypse Radio. That was a real custom job AMV of Jens Lekman's Maple Leaves. Which, listen, I'm in a waze right now because apparently no one told me, no one warned me ahead of time that Nights Fall over Cortadala was being taken off the internet, and I thought I owned it, but I think I might have bought through Amazon, and then I think they may have like rescinded my ownership of it. So if anyone like looks around on their floor and finds like a zipped up MP3 full album of Jens Lekman's Nights Fall Over Cortadala, if you email it to me, if you can find it, just like let me know because I love that album. it's, it's a real peak of that kind of like era of indie pop and stuff. I'm a big fan. But speaking of big fans, I have got someone else who I am a fan of, who you may know from issue 26 of Indiepocalypse with Ritual Quest. It's and how are you doing?
Shio Nigada, hey y'all, I'm doing okay. I'm hanging out in the Mojave Desert right now,
Oh, perfect.
drinking a little coffee.
That sounds like great, maybe. I don't know. I like my
Eh,
wet, weird environment in New England.
I just spent like 6 months in the swamp, and it was like my first time like really living swamp life, and I
Yeah.
actually like the situation changed, and I had to like come back to the Mojave for a bit. But I might wind up in like Oklahoma, like Tulsa next.
Okay.
Go
That's
hang out in like some Ozark forest zone.
yeah. That is. I feel like there's like that whole area, that whole like Ozark. Well, maybe it is more popular now because of a titular television show. But I feel like there is like a that part of like that Ozark that sort of, or like the like Appalachia or whatever, that is kind of like a forgotten part that people forget is in America.
Yeah, it's starting to come back because also there's like some sort of like cosmic horror podcast. I think it's called like Old Gods of Appalachia,
Okay.
and then they do like some eldritch horror stuff, and it's like based around like folk tales there. And then yeah, there's like a show Ozarks. I'm not really familiar with it, but
Neither am I.
Reservation Dogs just came out on
Okay.
FX from Taika
Yes.
Waititi and Sterling Harjo, and that takes place like out in like southeast Oklahoma, like eastern Oklahoma, kind of Ozarks edge.
Yeah.
But like there's a lot going on there because like half of Oklahoma, I mean more than half is like was like reservations, and then like the 5 tribes over there just got like reservation status back, and I'm Cherokee, so like there's like a lot of development going on in like Tulsa, northeast Oklahoma on like the Cherokee res right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like kind of looking to head back there and like reconnect and like hang out, see what the game scene and comic scene and music scenes are like there.
Right. Right. Because people forget there are scenes everywhere. Before, like, it kind of going
Yeah,
back to our original talks we were having, like, there were scenes before there were a giant pile. Everyone was throwing all their stuff into a big pile online, and there's no reason for those to
yeah.
go away.
And like I was born in like 91, and I saw the internet. I was like an early adopter. Like my
Yeah.
family had like a Windows 98 computer and a DSL line,
Right.
but I lived in like Fresno, which is like a more metropolitan now, but it's like a semi-rural sort of agricultural like time warp zone in the Central Valley.
Yeah.
And it kind of gets like mentioned in a lot of movies, like The Karate Kid. It's like where he doesn't want to have to move to, and like it get mentions in like Rugrats and Wild Thornberries and stuff. It's like a
Yeah.
butt of jokes,
Yes, I know the
and it's
name.
like yeah, and it's like a couple miles from Bakersfield, and they're like virtually the same kind of like vibe.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, like so the internet, was even kind of like internet age time stuff was like even slower to adopt there because there's like greater like economic disparity there. And yeah, so like there was still like pockets of like people trading cassette tapes and printing zines. Like so like I grew up with like a lot of that, and like wanting to make zines and like making my own comics and like printing them out, at home, and like stapling them and like passing them out and stuff.
Yeah, that is a world I wish I had. I'm kind of sort of suburban enough. Not like what's the word? It's like that. I feel like there is a word that's like mid suburbs and mid rural. Like it's like clearly you're not commuting to the city because the city is
Oh,
so far away, but it's like you have
yeah, yeah.
neighbors.
It's like a town, but it's not like a full-on city, or it's outside like a bigger city, but it's
Yeah,
not like totally rural. Yeah, and I've spent a lot of time in like places like that. Like I moved around a lot when I was younger, and I mostly lived in California,
yeah,
but mostly in like rural places.
right. Yeah,
Um,
I'm
but I spent like the last 10 years in LA.
Oh yeah, no, I am deep in bog country, and they're like
Yeah, I'm really in the swamps right
they're starting to
now.
they're starting to
Swamps
till them right
bogs.
now, or whatever they do to prep them. As I drive by, I see
Huh.
they're prepping the cranberry bogs, getting them ready for the season.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's right. You can do the bog growing because they'll grow as like a bush and stuff, but that I think the bog style growing is like a new thing. I actually study
Oh,
a lot of like botany and horticulture and
okay,
like also like mycology on the side, especially like native plants from around here
yeah,
and like native medicine. So like yeah, I'm really into cranberries
okay,
and
yeah.
yeah.
And as far as like my entire life, I've always known them to be like, oh no, there's just bogs all over the town. There's just like
Yeah.
just huge swaths of land that are just like these just cranberry bogs, and seasonal workers will come in and they'll just like get in their big boots and go in the bogs and pick cranberries, I suppose.
It's like kind of interesting that like certain areas have kind of grown now to they've been like forced into growing certain types of things
Yeah.
like outside Bakersfield was like pecan country. Like I remember seeing like lots of almonds and pecans and apricots, and then like
Okay.
outside Fresno's raisins. But like cranberries grew as far as I knew like up like mid Canada down to like Florida, and
Yeah.
then like
Okay.
even maple trees. Like everyone thinks of like Vermont or like Canada for maple trees, but maple grew from like the top of Canada to like through mid Mexico.
Right.
There's still like maple trees lost in like Texas and stuff.
Yeah, but if I stop by in like El Paso at a rest stop, I'm probably not going to get a lot of maple syrup stuff
Maple,
flying around.
yeah, fresh tapped maple or
Yeah.
like
Right.
yeah,
But it's
yeah,
every other place up in Vermont and New Hampshire, which
yeah.
I'm going to a show in Vermont next month, and I'm looking
Oh,
forward.
like a game or comic show or
Yeah,
something.
like it's like a fantasy convention. You see, with the non-game conventions, they all get bolted onto weird different things. They're usually like geek things.
I'm like kind of into that. Like
Yeah,
I spent a lot of my like teenage years volunteering at like local con stuff in Fresno, and I'm like kind of into like those weird smaller like local cons that are like it's kind of anime and games and
yeah,
music and maybe like zines and maybe like this local celebrity who like was on
right,
TV one time.
right. I was in 3 episodes of Rugrats. You may remember me. Um, yeah, because I think it's like also like a better scene for like people to bring games because there's a better audience expectation to like buy stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Like I've noticed that in like smaller cons and smaller communities, like people are more eager to like walk away with something cool
Yeah,
that they can't like get anywhere else or normally find versus like Comic Con or Anime Expo where like things are usually overpriced and people are kind of going more for the general like overwhelming experience than
right,
like actual like whatever con interaction type things usually or
right.
like
Or at most, like I'm gonna get my big version of Goku or whatever.
yeah.
Or whatever the
Yeah.
Goku of the era is.
I also grew up going to a lot of like flea market and swap meet type things,
Yeah,
and like at least when I was younger, those seemed a lot cooler because there would be like people who would be like, there's this punk guy who's like an old biker and he has like a weird cassette collection and he's selling like all these cassettes and zines and like or you'd find like weird old video game stuff. It wouldn't just be like normal junk or like produce, but like you'd find like a pretty good collection of like obscure stuff.
yeah. I went. I remember we went to a concert in Providence like a couple. I'm gonna say a couple of years ago to give myself to avoid the unerring march of time, and there was like there it said they were like, oh, a flea market too. And the flea market seemed to be just a guy with a card table selling VHSs. But
That's pretty cool though.
yeah, yeah, and I mean I regularly go to one in Boston or technically Cambridge, I believe. That is like intentionally like a punk flea market run by I don't know what you call art collectives and loose things, but I feel like my own town has them too. It has like regular festivals. As a child, I understood them to be the festivals, but I guess like I didn't have the context of what they were outside of places with like stalls and food trucks and that kind of thing. I guess I understood what I understood what like a Cape Verde festival was. Like, oh no, I know what that is, but like there were other ones that are just like more broadly named. That's like I don't know what this is anymore.
There was one kind of cool one I went to. So like my experience is the smaller and like out of the way the town, the better the flea market, swap meet, or like secondhand store is going to be. Like I found like weird old Sega Saturn stuff at like vintage shops in like Reading or outside Reading, in like weird little towns. But I went to, there was like this short-lived music festival, unless it's still going. I think it only went for a while, called like What the Heck Fest.
Okay.
In Anacortes, Washington. And Anacortes is like this super small town, like over by Puget Sound, kind of by like Vancouver, almost to the border. And they when this like music festival happens, they were doing what's called like shipwreck days, where just like anyone can line up, I guess, on the sidewalk of the main strip and like have a little table and sell whatever they want.
Okay.
And like I found so many cool like weird cassettes. Like I wound up like on a road trip there, like not knowing what was going on or any of the bands, and it was like such a cool experience. Like I saw Earth, this like I don't know, like seminal.
Oh yes, I'm familiar with Earth.
Okay, yeah. Like he was like Kurt Cobain's best friend, and they're like the like originators of what do you call it? Like not ambient metal,
like drone metal, perhaps.
Drone metal, and then like Sun kind of named themselves like after the amps and after the band Earth, and everyone loves like Sun O or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, I saw them
you're talking to a guy who's going to be going to a Godspeed show next month.
Oh man.
I've
seen like so many bands, and I've like when I was younger, I just used to see like anyone I could afford to see. Like I didn't care who they were, didn't know who they were, and I saw like Earth, and they're like now my favorite band. Like 10 years, or 15 years later or something, and like got me into like country music essentially. But like I saw like a weird band, and I got like a bunch of weird old cassettes and T-shirts and stuff. And it's like the more out of the way the like punk festival or like flea market, like the weirder, better stuff usually, and like the more interesting vibe.
Right.
I feel
because it's that sweet spot where it's cheap enough for the people, the local scene to go, but like not viable enough for show for people to like come from like way out of state.
Yeah.
So you get more of a like whatever the local flavor is. You don't have that kind of very specific kind of. Oh, here's the people who go to every massive show because they're massive commercial events.
Yeah.
What a getting into country music through Earth. I think of sometimes about, I guess, I mean, myself and maybe you even grew up in a weird era of country music where it's like, growing up, I very much did not like it.
Because so like I'm Native American and I'm like non-binary transgender, and that's like most of what current country music, pop country music, like hates or tries to fight against or whatever. And actually one of my uncles, he was like Buck Owens' chief engineer and like right-hand man for some years, like before I even like met my uncle.
Yeah.
And and like Buck Owens is like a big like the Crystal Palace, like Bakersfield sound, country guy. But so like I didn't care about country music at all, and then I heard Earth live, and it was for like The Bees Made Honey and the Lion's Skull, which was like when they went really far into this like country drone thing.
Okay.
Which like culminated in like Angels of Darkness, Demons of Light, where they added like cello. It's like the most amazing like country album and like drone album IMO.
Yeah.
But so I kind of was like getting really into this album after like remembering going to that show like years later, and then I was like, country music, and then I started looking up like other like native country musicians, because I was like, there's got to be like cool natives out there, and I found out like Hank Williams is like was like Cherokee and Muskogee.
Right.
And so I like through like Earth, and then like thinking about that and like looking into Hank Williams, I kind of like started looking into more like underground country and like country by like Native Americans and LGBT people.
Yeah, I played who was the artist? because they did a cover of Leonard Cohen's Suzanne, and I played them on this show fairly during my Leonard Cohen block that I had.
Oh yeah, his like second and third album I'm really into. It's like Songs from a Room and Songs of Love and Hate or something.
Yeah.
Like I actually listened to those two albums quite a lot, and like nothing really else of his stuff.
For some reason, I had one night. It was I say for some reason, it was primarily because of that one Akewood comic where he has the workout tape, and the workout tape is just Suzanne 8 times. So I just played Suzanne 8 times, or however many times. My God, I played a lot of music on this show. My God,
Avalanche. I'm gonna admit, Avalanche like gives me chills every time I hear it. There was something I was watching recently that I like had lagged behind on. It might have been like that show Halt and Catch Fire or something about like the Silicon Prairie pre-Silicon Valley stuff.
Okay.
And I want to say they like played it out of nowhere, and I hadn't like listened to it in like months, and I was like, oh man, I got to go back and like put on some Leonard Cohen and like some Hank Williams and stuff.
Yeah, and something that made me think about that recently was like it was not J. Bruce Ismay. What are you talking about? Musician, his name is Ismay.
Ismay. That sounds familiar.
Is it kind of like, I think it trades in that kind of like queer country world. But
I'm gonna write that one down.
Yeah. Good.
I like was recently checking out like Norma Tanega. Like she actually kind of got popular right around when I was looking into her discography, because like What We Do in the Shadows, the TV show, came out.
Yeah, that album.
And they used like You're
slaps
Dead.
Hard.
Oh yeah. Well, the album's like I feel like every song's like a slightly different genre, but like You're Dead is maybe like the greatest country song ever.
Yeah, that's
or like and folk. It's like a country folk combo. And then she was like a gay Filipino like painter.
Yeah,
she was like a super cool lady.
Oh my God, her Wikipedia page is way longer now.
Oh, is it really? People like started getting into her, digging her up, and like and she only died like I think in 2019 or something, like really recently. And she was like I think teaching painting in LA or something.
Yeah, because it was one of those things where when I heard that song, I was like, wow, this song slaps. And so I went and looked at the artist.
Taika Waititi has like a good music taste. I feel like every once in a while, like there's a really good song, and I feel like that's probably him like picking something that he heard when he was younger,
right?
Or because like he's like gotten pretty hardcore into the indigenous scene, like general world indigenous stuff, but especially like because he's Maori, as from what I recall. So there's been a lot more like indigenous. I feel like we're kind of going through like a general indigenous renaissance, and then especially like a Native American renaissance in America.
Yeah,
like especially post Rutherford Falls and post Reservation Dogs, and then like Taika getting popular, like kind of like people are more looking into like indigenous creators from around the world.
Because he's taking his. I mean, look at our like biggest movie star in the world. Like, isn't The Rock like the biggest movie star in the entire world?
Oh, he's definitely like, I think last I heard he was the highest paid, and that was like why he and Vin Diesel are in a beef together, is because like Vin wasn't being paid as much as him on like his own movie franchise or something.
Yeah, which is let's be fair, he is very famous. But But he's like I forget if I think he's Polynesian or I can't remember if I don't remember.
Then Jason Momoa is big right now too, and Jason Momoa is also like either like Polynesian or Maori. I can't remember right now. I'm actually like I kind of avoid like a lot of like big blockbuster movie stuff just because like I have a lot that I'm doing. I actually like don't watch a lot of movies or TV show, or like if I have something on, if I'm not like specifically sitting out like an hour to watch something, I have it in the background. Like I've been watching a lot of 90s sitcoms lately. Like I just turned 30 a couple of months ago, and I'm like, okay, let me see what was going on when I was born, and like how well like Seinfeld holds up, which like as like gross as some of those actors are in real life, like some of the writing actually like holds up pretty well.
Yeah.
And then I started checking out Third Rock from the Sun, and I've been like falling asleep watching that, and like I'm amazed at like how well that show like handles like LGBT stuff, like racial stuff. Like I started reading about it, and like the whole show started as like a commentary on anthropology in general, and like the treatment of like indigenous people and native people, and like stepping into the show, like knowing that and like watching how they act as like studying humans, like posing as humans is like, I don't know, kind of interesting from like a native perspective.
Yeah, shows are very like the way like you forget that they like constantly make shows like, and they've been doing it since they invented TV, and there's so many like I was talking with a friend about how many movies get preserved that last beyond a decade. Like how many movies in a year get put out versus how many movies in a year people talk about 10, 20 years out. It's like tiny.
I actually just watched last night. I was watching some like special like my fiance put on. It was like a 3-part special on like cult movies and like general like cult movies that people enjoy now, and from like the 30s to the 2000s or something. And it was like all movies that don't seem cult at all to me because I grew up, in the age of the internet where like everyone and also like I feel like every 90s cartoon referenced like anything you could think of as being cult. Like I don't know, like every cartoon had like, I mean, this isn't the best cult movie example, but like 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yes.
Like I have a friend, like Minerva Zoda, who like was like who I was like a really big Kubrick fan when I was younger, and like I do a lot of like studying film and like cinematography for like applying to comics. And like 2001 was like a big deal for me as like a science fiction and like horror movie that people don't like often look at as like being a horror movie.
Right.
And then Arthur C. Clarke being like an interesting like gay writer, sci-fi scientist, like the Clarke Bell. Anyway, it was like a big deal to me. And I remember like them saying, or she was saying she had never seen it and like was maybe going to one day, but like felt like she didn't really need to because every TV show and cartoon from like 1990 to like 2010 was doing some sort of like 2001 reference, like quoting the show or the movie. And then I feel like it's like that with like any movie, like I don't know, Fast Times at Ridgemont High or like Rock and Roll High School like were mentioned, and I feel like I saw those as a kid because they were like referenced in other things.
Right. Yeah, it's
it feels like something doesn't become cult when it's like so widely referenced. Like there was like a cartoon, Bless the Hearts, that came out on Fox like a couple years ago, and they do like a whole thing about Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I was like, yeah, I guess that was like a cult movie, like 50 years or whenever it came out, basically.
They didn't, but they like did a redo on Fox. It was like they did like a modern like basic cable like revival, like television revival for it. So it's kind of beyond that point. Yeah, they did a new version. Kind of, I feel like that was a thing that I didn't realize existed. That occasionally they'll just put on like musicals on TV. Like they'll just do like Grease or Rent or something. Oh yeah, I kind of remember that era. Like, because when I was younger, I didn't have like satellite or cable. I had a lot like antenna TV. Like whatever VHF. And like I remember like a lot of like old musicals and like being on like Fox in the midday or something during the summer. Like I've seen Grease a couple times on like Little Shop of Horrors or something. Yeah, and I think they're still somewhat doing them, or like within like the 2000s or the 2010s, because I feel like that Rocky Horror one is relatively recent. But yes, Rocky Horror for whatever. Also, but I don't know if I'm too far up my ass to know whether or not it's like a cult thing or not.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I feel like when it's like it's widely in the like public conscience. Like I remember being 10 and like being able to see a T-shirt with like the dripping lipstick, like lips, and knowing like, oh, that's Rocky Horror. I haven't seen it, but I know what it is. And
the Hot Topic test.
Like, can I guess if they saw it in Hot Topic, Right.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. That kind of brought me back to something. Invader Zim, Third Rock from the Sun. It feels like Jonah Vasquez was probably watching a lot of that when he was drawing comics. Because like there's a lot of like bits in Third Rock from the Sun that like I remember from like Zim growing up, and like I feel like he probably got a lot of influence from like the weird infiltrating human society stuff, like hyper capitalistic alien societies.
That's the kind of thing that's very fascinating when you see what feels like someone's really obvious influence. Like when I watched Harold and Maude, I'm like, oh, Wes Anderson saw this movie. He 100% saw this movie.
Oh yeah. I hadn't even thought about that, but like you mentioning that, totally. Like that was probably his favorite movie.
That is like
you know.
clearly like a weird rich kid, and like it's off-centric and off kilter. Anyway, yeah,
They brought that up too in that like cult movie documentary, and that was also like a movie I saw when I was like 14 because it
Yeah.
was mentioned in some TV show, and also that show Bless the Hearts like brought it up too. And yeah, it's like it felt like it by the time they're like doing this documentary, none of these things had been cult for like at least 20 years
Yeah.
or something.
That was one of those things I didn't. I had friends that liked it, but they also liked a lot of stuff I didn't like. So, you know, when you're in high school, you have friends who have like kind of sketchy tastes, and you're like, Sometimes they hit, but I wasn't taking the chances
Yeah.
because I also liked a lot of stuff that I couldn't stand. They kind of like,
Oh no, I definitely get what you mean or get
Yeah.
that vibe. Like, yeah. Also, it's interesting to see, indie games. Like, I wanted to bring up, I've been, hanging around the indie game scene since I was like 9, or something like 99, and it was like the main guy I remember being talked about was like Ben Croshaw Yahtzee, who
Yes.
now does like zero punctuation or whatever.
back in his AGS
He did like
days.
like 7 Days of Strange, or it was like 5 Days of Strangers, 7 Days of Skeptic, and then he did like a text parser game and like a finale or something. I remember playing those as a kid and like doing like I refuse to like learn how to code kind of like I know
Yeah.
HTML, CSS, and PHP for like graphic design freelance work stuff and web design, but like for my own projects I do like finite state machine, like I use Playmaker and Unity. I'm trying out Godot for my next big 3D project. And like I used to try out like all these weird little programs that were like that, where you would like what you see is what you get, click together, like load in sprites that you made and like make weird little platformers or shooters.
I started in AGS is where I got my very first game design started. It was in AGS when those like
rad.
Those Blue Cup forums. I think it's like probably a little post his era, I think. But like I was doing their monthly game jams and things like that.
Oh man.
That was
And then like the indie games forum kind of like came onto the radar.
Yeah.
But that was probably around like 2010 when I went on there. But I was thinking of like cult stuff becoming mainstream. And there were 2 games that were like a really big deal to me when I was like a kid in like the indie game scene. And it was like Yume Nikki, the RPG Maker, like dream. Like experiential like horror thing. And then like Cave Story.
Yes.
Which are now like, Yume Nikki has like a remake also and is on Steam. And then Cave Story had like, an HD reboot on the Wii or whatever.
Right.
And is on like every platform now.
And
But I remember playing like fan translations, like having to patch them and like, and then at one point someone hacked like a PSP like version. And I was like, in high school, I was like hacking PSPs for people, like when you had to like cut the batteries apart. And the PSP Slim era.
I saw that, and I never indulged because I always like, I have an emulator. I don't need it on the go.
Oh yeah. Well, when I was younger, like I got really into electrical engineering stuff, and so like I've like done soldering and like dealing with wiring and like synth, like little step tone generator and minor FM synth building since I was like a kid. So like I was like probably the one kid on campus who like kind of knew what they were doing and felt comfortable doing it. Right. But like like a Cave Story, like playing Cave Story on the PSP with the widescreen was like pretty cool, and that D-pad.
You were predicting the Vita.
Oh yeah, and then now the Steam Deck.
As a PlayStation indie game machine, ahead of your time. I had only ever modified my Slim PS2 because they were very easy to mod. I think it was the equivalent of putting tape over a sensor, I believe.
Oh, I was into hacking Dreamcast games and like getting Dreamcast games off of like MIRC and like burning them to CDs back in like 2003 or whatever.
Nothing but like ripping ISOs off the internet and just burn. Yeah, I would use them to like demo games. I've always been like a very weird kind of like piracy into ownership kind of guy.
Unfortunately, it's like there's not a good way to preserve a lot of stuff. Like there's a lot of things that no one cares about, or they lost the backups or the original stuff. Like there's like a notorious history of like early digital America and like Japan like not keeping any of their like source files or like backups and just junking them or burning them.
That was listen. I at the beginning of this segment, I lamented the fact that because I was apparently not on the right parts of the internet, I cannot have a copy of Nightfall over Cortadala. And now here we are. I'm typing download.mp3 into my internet, trying to find this thing, and I'm bringing it back to LimeWire. All those days.
Oh someone who isn't me told me about a program called like SoulSeek or whatever.
I'll figure it out. I'll find a copy of that somehow. But we're gonna close down this little segment we have here, and then we're gonna go take another break. Listen, I'm raring and ready to go. We could chat forever, and that's kind of why I start these shows, so I can just chat and hang out with people, because like this is my GDC. Hashtag my GDC, where I just invite people over.
I have been to GDC. I do have like some GDC stories.
Yeah.
Like 2014, 2013. But it's not great. Yeah.
No. I've been to an
This is better.
I've been to an Indiecade. Yes, it's much easier to not spend. I'm spending $0 on this.
Yeah.
And I'm still meeting people, and I'm not catching COVID.
Well, I definitely believe in like meeting people through making things. That's like how I've met anyone, like, is basically through making stuff, and then like, yeah. Yeah,
it's a very, if only there were better ways to not do it without. I guess that's to bring it back. That's the benefit of your local show, because going to the important events that are like ultra expensive is an inherently, gate kept way of meeting people.
Yeah, definitely.
But listen, I said I'm going to go to break. I'm going to go to break. I'm going to break.
Go for it.
See you all in like 3:42. Hello, and welcome back to Indiepocalypse Radio. That was me. So I kind of like was searching for AMVs, and I've discussed on the show, like, what do I do when I simply get sick of tolerable to hear Linkin Park songs? And I thought to myself, I had that track, and I was like, Dragon Ball Z and Linkin Park is of an era, but is JoJo and the Killers not a Linkin Park for our new modern era? I think
JoJo and the Killers.
I think. Listen, the Killers aren't not Linkin Park. I'll say
you unlocked it like an early memory of like seeing like a DBZ brought over Broly movie or something in the 90s or 2000s, and then playing like Puddle of Mud or something, or
yeah, this is.
Oh dang! Yeah, playing like new metal stuff, like replacing the soundtrack and like with American new metal.
That is, it's a staple.
Like becoming an AMV itself, basically. Like
I don't remember what. Sorry, we got mildly distracted because we were talking about. Okay, no, he did. Yes, okay, yes. Yuasa did work on Cat Soup. I knew.
Oh, he did. Okay.
Yes,
but it wasn't a Yuasa. It wasn't like his project, right? Like,
no, he didn't direct it.
Okay, he worked on it.
He wrote it and he was the producer on it.
It's definitely like his vibe of thing, like bubbly, surreal, kind of fairy tale-ish. Like, he was like an animator I'm like more interested in. Like I saw Kaiba when it was like being fan subbed.
Yeah.
And like Kaiba was really cool to me because I'm into like weird, whimsical kind of sci-fi stuff.
Yeah, Kaiba looks like indie animation. It doesn't look like anime, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I love it when it looks like that. I'm not that into anime. I've seen a lot of anime, but like I'm really picky about art styles, and that's kind of whether I'll sit through 12 to 26 episodes or whatever,
Yes.
If it has like an art style I can like deal with, and like Kaiba definitely had that going on. Shaft, actually, just thinking like Shaft's content is like pretty gross IMO, like the Monogatari and like Madoka stuff, but they have like really interesting like weird art collage stuff going on, and like interesting camera angles. Thinking of like kind of like weirder anime type stuff, but yeah, like Kaiba had this really like I posted in the Discord like a link to like a bespoke anime music video, and it kind of has like an art feel like Kaiba that's like weirder, looser.
Yeah, it's one of those things I can't click as I'm running Voice Meter Banana because it'll just break.
Oh, I could probably post it in Twitch. I actually
Yeah.
opened it up in my browser.
Yes, you can.
Yeah,
If anyone wants to.
I'm looking at this Kaiba thing right now. It's like got a, because I didn't know what you're talking about, but I got it's kind of like got a weird retro looking style, like it's intentionally supposed
Yeah,
to be 60s
it's more like
anime.
Dr. Seuss kind of art, I guess I would like think of it as, like, than like just straightforward anime art.
Yeah, although in my opinion, which is somewhat uninformed, it definitely looks Japanese. It's not like it looks like a Western thing to me, but I could be wrong. I could.
Yeah, I think it's that whole thing of like chain of influences. Like you can kind of sometimes tell who's been influenced by what, or like where they're from, based on like how they draw or whatever.
Yeah, for sure.
Wait, what? What a weird sentence. I just saw.
Sorry, I was like,
no.
wait, from me or from?
No, from this Wikipedia
Because
entry.
I was doing something.
No, in the sentence I was not expecting that there's going to be a sequel to Tatami Galaxy by Science Saru on Disney Plus.
Oh yeah, that's pretty wild. They hired like a bunch of studios to do like 5-minute anime Star Wars bits recently or something.
What a...
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
I like Science Saru. Those are people who love to animate. And it shows.
Yeah.
They are fans of the medium, and which like means a lot. I like animation that animates. Weird controversial statements here. But
I gotta say, so like like when you're making a game or whatever, and you run it and it compiles and like you like see the game running and you can move the character around and you're like, wow, fucking did this. This is amazing. I did a lot of animation in school, and like seeing the animation run is like, it's like magic. Like seeing whether it's stop motion or hand drawn animation, seeing a bunch of frames put together and then suddenly turns into movement is like honestly probably the most euphoric thing I could think of, seeing that happen.
Yeah. As someone who loves to see it, I can't imagine the beauty it is to be the person who had made it.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird. You're like, yes, I did this. One of those.
love the forum around here. It's why I'm a big fan of the Sunday night show, the Ambiguity Program, which is like a show of just like weird animation and like underground and alternative animation indie stuff.
Wait, what is this?
The Ambiguity Program, hosted by cartoonist Evan Dom. He hosts it like every Sunday night at like 9 p.m. Eastern, and it's like indie animation, just like a showcase of indie or sometimes just like older animation, like old like Fleischer stuff that just looked back when the Fleischer stuff was real wild looking.
Yeah, I feel like, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah, I'm a regular endorsement for that show upon this show. That show is an influence on this show existing. The idea of having like a weekly radio, because I think he archives it now, but he also used to not archive it. The idea of having a show that wasn't archived and that people had to show up for, the idea of a radio show.
Yeah, that's versus. I mean, this is interesting because it's live, but I think a lot of people probably are going to listen to it as a podcast.
Yes, of course. There's probably like 6 people here, and that's generous. There's usually like 2, but
yeah.
I think the format helps. I like the idea of being, and this is me as someone who very rarely engages with chat because I feel like that's like a different vibe,
I like to engage with chat.
Yeah, I don't begrudge the people that do, but it's just not what I'm into.
Yeah, that's fine. I get that.
I'm kind of like I'll take if they know an answer to a question I have, I'll scoop it up from them. But
I do feel like the engaging with chat is a little bit like I'm a god speaking to people from on high.
Sure.
You get a little bit of that energy, which is weird. That's yeah.
It's a mixture of that and also being too personal at the same time. I can't be like, wow, I see you're glad to see you here again, Bong Lord. Thanks for showing up again. And I'm like, I never want to be greeted. I've seen people do that, and that's why sometimes if it's like a low count viewer thing, I will join anonymously, like
Yeah,
in incognito mode, because I don't want to be greeted.
definitely don't follow sometimes because like I'm scared when I click the follow button, it will
Yeah.
like go on the screen and somebody will be like, "Thanks for the follow," and I'll be like, bail out, get
No,
me out."
no, yes, literally, when I've followed accounts, I wait for off hours to follow them because I just don't want to engage in them in that style.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't want them to pop up their little SpongeBob. He's like, "Wow, thanks for joining." I
Hey,
joined. I joined the Wibbly crew.
Lycan, I may have found that game.
Ooh,
They may have left.
maybe I'm not sure. We're
Okay.
just posting. Oh, you know what? They were just posting stuff in the chat, so they probably switched over to like the Twitch app or something.
Okay.
But they're typing now. Mic not working. Okay. We got a dead mic, but don't worry. There's still two of us. We'll be fine. We'll
Okay, yeah,
manage.
that's fine. Well, I was gonna tell them I think I had found their game, but I'll wait till they come back.
Okay.
As yeah, that's the whole Twitch stream thing is like, okay, like promotion, whatever. I can fake and pretend like I know how to use Twitter and whatever else, but I feel like
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're back.
Oh, okay, yeah. My mic I think Twitch tried to like take over my mic or something. It was like a nightmare trying to, post those links, but those were like bespoke or fan like animated music videos.
Yes.
Yeah, like I was. Yeah, and the first one, it's like made by like a duo in Japan, and it kind of has like a Science Saru feel to it. Like
Right.
for being like a limited animation, like frame by frame, hand done thing.
so.
Yeah.
I think I found your game. Not your game, but the one you were telling me about.
Like interactive fiction visual novel double feature.
It's called The World to Reverse.
Oh, okay. Oh man, yeah. I think that was it, and that's like the extent of like visual novels. Like I basically like found that and played it, and then was kind of like okay, and then like I saw the Twine scene happen like when it got really big, and like that was pretty cool. But like The World to Reverse, I played that when I was like 12 or 13. There was like a fan translation or something.
Yeah, so this is the one I think because the tags say like hospital. They say cross-dressing, but I don't know if that's important to the text. Albino heroine being the femme version of hero, not the
Yeah.
Um,
I don't remember the plot very well. I feel like one was like it was like bubble path, like you could pick the path of the fiction, and it was about like wandering the streets of like an old town in Italy or something, and like going to an opera and then the other one was like being trapped in a hospital and like maybe
this seems like
having
the
a conversation
one.
with a girl.
Okay, this seems like that one. Okay.
Okay.
Anyway.
I really don't remember it, but I remember that being like basically like the height of like indie visual novel stuff at the moment. But like I'm ready to kind of like check out what people have been up to since I have dipped out of that.
Yeah, this is old. But yeah, the Twine thing was cool too. I still think Twine is a really sweet engine. I don't know why I said I still like Twine has disappeared. Twine is still around.
Yeah.
But
Definitely. It just like there was a moment where like everyone was like making Twine games. I think like companies were even trying to like jump on it. Like they recently jumped on like Indian visual novels and then like tabletop RPGs. Like there's like KFC visual novel and tabletop. I think.
Oh, KFC. They got
and like Wendy's too, I believe. Like I really don't remember. I try not to like pay attention to advertising stuff like that weird, but.
Hey, that being said, Magic the Gathering, those people, they made a visual novel to promote their new card set or whatever that was like not like a parody. It was like a, legit whatever fantasy visual novel. So, hey, somebody out there is trying. I mean, I don't really, whatever.
At the same time, I think they recently got in trouble because they released like a micro tabletop RPG to go with some deck they made or something, and it was just like a copy and paste of like some other independent game. Unless that was a different company and not Wizards.
I mean, it all goes back to Hasbro eventually, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It's some subdivision of them. I don't know if it was Wizards, but also, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Wizards. They seem like the kind of type. Listen, This is coming from someone who really enjoys playing Magic, who thinks it's a very fun and fascinating game.
Yeah,
But
me too. But
I like the concept. I've played like a handful of games and I'm like not horrible at it. But like I think just like conceptually, like all the weird little art. Like I saw Wizards of the Coast magazines growing up as a kid.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't like afford cards, but like my parents bought me like one or two of the magazines in the 90s, and I remember like looking through all the weird, kind of like scary and sort of
Yeah.
like ugly at the time, like fantasy art for like for Magic, and like the
Oh,
kind of like eldritch weird
it used to
pre-Morrowind
rule
stuff.
so hard. It used to be
yeah,
so good. They're getting better though. I think they're getting better. There was
I've always kind of wanted to do like my own little card game, but then
yeah,
also like miniatures and like 3D printing like little dudes is like interesting to me too.
right, because it's way more feasible now.
Yeah, it's incredible. Like where 3D printing has come. Like I'm really into like jewelry making and like also Art Deco design and like architecture.
Yeah,
And like now you can like 3D print gold. They're starting to build machines. Like for a while you could 3D print titanium, and they were building like limb and joint replacement stuff for critters and testing it on people. And then now they're like, well, now we can 3D print gold, and you can like recreate Art Deco jewelry, because like Art Deco jewelry was made through like different pressings and like foldings, and not like through current like jewelry means. It was like a display of like new technologies and materials at the time, and like even like currently made like Art Deco style jewelry doesn't really look very Art Deco, but you can 3D print the hard edges. And it's like kind of interesting that there's also like an Art Deco like theme kind of coming back around. Like there's a lot of like pulp stuff kind of coming back up. Like a lot of people are talking about Raised by Wolves, and that feels like like all the visuals are like illustrations from like Weird Tales in like the 30s.
right.
yeah. I mean, I feel like there's always creators going back to like retro, whether it's art styles or whatever else.
Yeah.
People are always
There's definitely like outliers, but then I feel like every once in a while there's like a wave that comes and goes. Like the outlier might have been like My Life as a Teenage Robot or whatever in like the mid 2000s. That was like an Art Deco pulp 30s like illustration flesher inspired thing. And then like coming back around now, we've got like a lot more like pulp themed stuff, or like 30s referencing stuff. Or like another dude who does like animated music videos. I think his name's like Mick Bays or like Macbeth, and he does like music, and he's like a French illustrator, and he does everything in like flesher style, like weird kind of like
Well, I mean, there's
tattoo flesher.
I was gonna say there's Cuphead. There's very prominent.
Oh yeah, Cuphead,
was
both the
like,
game and the TV show. Yeah.
Which is very very of that. Although it was weird because I mean I didn't watch the show, but I saw the trailer. I'm like, this doesn't. It kind of just looks like a regular show. It seemed weird.
Well, it's still done with Toon Boom and like
Yeah.
done with like motion tweening, like post flash style versus frame by frame.
Yeah.
Yeah, which like sometimes Toon Boom and like tweening can actually look really good. Like I actually started watching like My Little Pony Friendship is Magic at the end, because like their animation for being like a flash based show was like getting really insane. Like the detail that they were doing, and like I don't care for Rick and Morty, but like the first season of Rick and Morty did some kind of like interesting stuff, and then he was at Harmon Studio, did like a Harmon Quest TV show where they kind of like pushed the envelope of like Toon Boom, but you can't push it that far, and you kind of have to know what you want to do and not be too adventurous with like camera angles. So like some shows can pull it off, but like in the end, like really limited hand frame animation is like more interesting to me. Like even if it's like 15 frames per second, and it looks janky, like there's this artist Vune, Bewn, who does like hand drawn stuff, and they were like big on Tumblr, and they actually had stuff on like FX or Fox and like Adult Swim, and their stuff is like like handmade in a month, like really janky, like wiggly line zine art, basically like moving zine art is like kind of my vein of art and like the stuff I'm interested in.
Yeah,
like it looks like kind of wiggly and janky and like handmade, but then it happens to be like moving and colorful and sound.
I feel like that sort of like a handmade style is real fascinating to everybody, including me, because it's real approachable. Like you can look at it and be like, I see how this is made. I could maybe even do it. It draws people. It's like people who like low budget movies. You look and you see and you're like, wow, I can see how this movie was made, and it draws you into the process, which is fascinating, I think, for a lot of people.
So with like that like loose art style, like I feel like it sort of has a crossover with like people call it like naive art and outsider art and like more like children's book art or yeah, zine art style. I
Yeah.
feel like also you can maybe do a lot more intense emotional and like fiction like themes because you're not visually taking yourself as seriously, so it's sort of like can soften the blow and like inadvertently like people will let their guards down and become more emotional over some things that are even more cartoony looking. And I know this was like something discussed when the Earthbound sequel, Mother 3, was like the fan translation was going around, and people were like talking about that a lot. How like if you do something with really cute graphics, you can kind of disarm people, and then if you throw like really emotional or like mature dramatic themes in there, it can, in some instances, make even more like it's mindset and therefore like putting their guard up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
It reminds me how like the game I'm looking I reinstalled Steam on this computer even because I want to some point play Perfect Tides, which is yeah, if you're familiar with Octopus Pie, the long standing, now over of course, but the old webcomic, which is the same thing that kind of trades in that simpler cartoony style, but also is like it's deeply about interpersonal relationships, but it has a very disarming look to it. Anyway, Perfect Tides kind of has that. I mean, it's that artist who made it, so it has that similar style. But right.
I feel like another like I definitely love that like that's also a thing that seems common to more like independent artists and like experimental artists, but also not to even like a really big world, huge deal, game-changing kind of thing for people was Adventure Time. I mean, it was like hyper cute and simplistic, and yet like they did like later on when they got like really weird writers, like he was picking. It seemed like Pendleton didn't maybe write as much of the show, but he knew how to like cultivate his like crew, and he would like pick up people from like artist alleys and from like zine conventions and. That was like a period where like J.G. Quinnell was doing that too for like regular show, and so you'd get like these really interesting like perspectives from people who mostly just have self-published to like other like poor weirdo type people who align with them or whatever.
Michael DeForge was an Adventure Time staple.
He was like he was like a big deal when I was younger. I didn't really care as much about reading comics as I did making them because like I mostly encountered superhero stuff until like. Manga kind of came over here, and so like Trigun and like Blame and Alien 9, I kind of like got into like those weirder kind of ones, and then like all of a sudden like indie comics exploded right before Adventure Time took off, and like you could find Michael DeForge and Brandon Graham stuff, and like the Meat House Collective was putting out like weird anthologies, and like and that was like when I really was like, I'm going to do comics and maybe, try to do some animation if I feel like it. But like, that was when I was like officially like, dang, yeah, no, comics are my calling for sure. Like there are other people doing this weird stuff that I've been like craving. You know?
I love the independent comics are in such a good spot. I mean, in terms of publishing and self-publishing and Kickstarters and all that stuff. Like, listen, I'm sure there's still no money in it like there's always been, but there's a lot.
I love looking at like Koyama Press. Yeah. If you're familiar with like Annie Koyama, because like she's interesting as like a figure where she kind of like helped foster a lot of like that earlier kind of alt comic, indie comic coming into the more mainstream like Michael DeForge stuff, and then she kind of like retired. Yeah, and then she kind of like retired, but now she does like micro grants for comics artists to kind of like help them like get into that.
Kind of like what's his like the Ninja Turtle guys did that for a while too, like Eastman and Laird had their publishing grants and whatever.
Zarek Foundation. Yes. I actually like really wanted to get into that when I was a kid, and then like by the time I was like old enough, they had like stopped doing it.
Yeah, but they did it for a long time.
And then speaking of like weird older, like pioneering indie people, the like controversial Dave Sim of the Cerebus series, and the incredible Gerard. Like Gerard's backgrounds are like the main reason I've like read Cerebus, honestly. Aside from it being like kind of like an early experimental, like psychedelic and pulp mocking like thing, but like Cerebus, like finding that when I was younger too, like when I found like Michael DeForge and Brandon Graham, like I started finding like also about the history of indie comics, and then also like Cerebus and the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles guys like collaborating and doing like crossover issues like way early because they were both like self-published people.
Yeah, I've been reading through Usagi Yojimbo recently, and he does.
Oh yeah, and like that they were like also I think all hanging out together
Yeah.
too. Like I think he did crossovers too,
He
or
did, yeah,
he at least inspired that stuff. Yeah.
There's like, here's the Ninja Turtles, and I'm pretty sure when I was a child I owned a toy Usagi Yojimbo, but I had no context for what it was.
Yeah, I remember seeing those comics as a kid and not understanding that it wasn't a Ninja Turtles spin-off.
Right? Yes.
It was a funny animal martial arts comic.
Yeah, I think I always thought of him as a Ninja Turtles character that was in like a show episodes that I didn't see or something.
Yeah. But
Right.
I mean, I think that Usagi Yojimbo, I don't know if it predates Ninja Turtles or postdates it, but I think it gained some popularity because of its similarity to Ninja Turtles.
I think it, like, I'm probably wrong, but I feel like it came out right before and was like an influence for. And then a thing people don't realize is that the Tick, he was also like fans with all those guys and hanging out, and like the Tick was inspired by a character called the Roach that's like a parody of like Wolverine and like hyper masculine superheroes that appeared in like early Cerebus comics.
Yeah,
it was like it was like kind of like a parody of like Wolverine, and then I feel like it might have had like
I don't know.
dang, that one Mexican superhero, the Red Cricket. I forgot.
I'm not
his name.
sure.
I have no idea.
Oh man, there's like a slapstick, like long, like multi-hundred episode, like long-running Mexican like superhero series that's like a skin in Fortnite recently, but like Bumblebee Man on The Simpsons is like kind of like a reference to him, and it's like I forget the term in Spanish. I can understand Spanish really good. I can like speak it, but it means like the Red Cricket or something.
Okay, so it's a Spanish language character it's like a Mexican comic, not like an American comic set in Mexico, is what you're saying.
It was like a TV show parodying like superhero comics, and it was like a low budget 70s 80s like oh man, I can't believe I'm blinking on it. My internet connection's like dying all of a sudden.
Looking at it because I'm just like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, I'm not sure. There is a thing called the Cricket. I'm doing internet research, but this seems like it's not the thing.
El Chapulín, Colorado. El Chapulín, Colorado. That's what he's called. And like he's like parodied in like Bumblebee Man in The Simpsons is like probably what most people recognize, where it's like this like Spanish like Bumblebee, the Spanish speaking like Bumblebee dressed like dude, and it's like a reference to this. And like I feel like the Roach was maybe also a reference to this, but in the end the Tick was a reference to the Roach from Cerebus.
Yeah.
But then the Tick like took off too. Like they're still like doing. Didn't they like do like an Amazon Tick reboot live action?
Yeah,
and then like interesting enough, like the dudes who worked on like the Venture Brothers, or like one of them like got his start on the Tick, like the animated one that came out before the live action one. Most people are familiar with.
That's what I was about to say. What's his face? Not Doc, the other guy. Jackson Public.
Doc Hammer. Jackson Public. Yeah,
Jackson Public worked with
Christopher McCulloch.
Worked with Christopher McCulloch. Yeah, whatever. No, that's his real. Whoever the Tick guy is. Yeah,
I forget which one's which.
Christopher McCulloch is Christopher McCulloch is Jackson Public. Doc Hammer is just Doc Hammer.
Jackson. Okay. And the Doc Hammer was in the band, right? Because he has like a emo band or a hardcore band. He had
like a band, and he was like a painter. And listen, that show has some issues here and there, But I deeply love that show. I think it's like quite.
It has a lot going on, and it's definitely like a work. Like someone who loves their craft and is trying to like push it.
Yeah,
as far as they can go.
It still feels like quite like nothing else that's on TV in a lot of ways.
Yeah, for sure.
It's actually what got me into Adventure Time in a weird way, because I was looking for something that felt like that, something that felt very singular in its style, and that's how I kind of found my way there. And then that's the only thing that's kind of felt like the same kind of like world buildy, but not ultra dedicated to its world, like not ultra reverential.
Like loose world building that like relies more on mythology than exposition or whatever, like referencing things that may or may not be shown at some later time or could be picked up for something else.
Right
Like I'm into that, like loose mythology.
Yes, yeah. I don't need like everything explained to me endlessly. I don't need to hear.
I hate that. Like I like mystery. That's why I like Demon Souls. And like I was really into Demon Souls when it like first came over here, when people were like importing it from like Southeast Asia. There was like an
Yeah.
English version, and then they just brought it here. That game, and then like seeing Elden Ring like basically become like the most popular thing right now is kind of interesting. Because that was like, I remember that like you only got the story if you sought it out and like made the effort to like read the flavor text or communicate or like do the right junk,
or just like get a sense of like parse it out from the world, not like even have
you get what you put into it, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, there's that famous like short like comic kind of thing, right, about abstract art, where he's like abstract art. I'll find it in a second. While I'm talking about that, I will say Ninja Turtles came out in March.
Oh yeah, it was like a 2-panel. Someone's like criticizing Jackson Pollock, and then is like, well, you can interpret it however you want.
Right,
because you're like the audience and also the participant or something.
Yes, it's like what's this supposed to be? And it's like it's supposed to be what, and then it goes, what are you supposed to be?
Yeah. I actually just saw that for the first time recently, which like I have like complicated feelings about, because I'm definitely for like poetic and interpretational like stuff, but at the same time, I feel like if you're not clear with some of your intentions, they could be like misconstrued and like even co-opted.
Right. It's almost as if art is complicated and it doesn't have a right answer.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's also
like a whole nebulous thing, reliant on like centuries of culture and context.
Right, and like a lot of people's different cultural understandings about how different things work, and like so much stuff is like baked in. Like, would someone in another country with even like an understanding of the English language be able to parse out like a deeply ironic comedy podcast?
That's kind of a thing I think about a lot, is like how universal is your theme, or like who could this reach at the farthest like reaches. Like I recently read about like Shadow of the Colossus was such a big deal, and everyone like went nuts over it and was like, are video games art, yes or no, and I recently read that like Guillermo del Toro actually did an Ico, and he had said something like it actually changed how he approached filmmaking. And that's like kind of interesting to me, because I did play those like when they came out, and they did change like a lot of stuff for me. And I'm definitely at the school of like subtractive design, or like like but also like I had an experience where like
we're losing you for a second.
Huh? Say that again. You said I'm definitely of the school. You broke up for a minute.
Of like it sometimes gets called like subtractive design. Okay. It's like removing elements that aren't totally necessary to like your message or intent. Like if you come up with a bunch of ideas and then scaling back, do I need this HUD? Do I need, does this aid the experience as a whole versus like what I'm trying to communicate and like the experience as a player?
Thinking about that.
Something Shadow of the Colossus. There was like one more part where I had a friend who like liked video games when they were younger. They were a little older than me, but they kind of left it off at the Super Nintendo era, and so they weren't like keen on like multi-button control. Like I tried to set them in front of Shadow of the Colossus as like, oh, here is what I like considered like an approachable game, because like there was like an Adam Sandler movie about it, like Reign Over Me or whatever. Like I mean, everyone knows Shadow of the Colossus, anyone can play it. And then I didn't realize until like I saw them struggling with the controls, like how many buttons the game was using, and it kind of like made me think about like simplicity and like what kind of audience you want and how approachable do you want your game. Versus like, are you trying to like show an experience, or communicate a message, and like how accessible do you want it?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, and I think about it.
I'm tired and hopped up on caffeine, so I'm like
no,
losing my train of thought.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. I kind of think about that stuff all the time when it's like, when it's like how to make a game appeal to a mass audience. And I think that's we started talking about interactive fiction, and I'm bringing it back, and I think that's one of the reasons why those have become popular. I said that genre or that medium kind of blew up with mobile gaming, and I think that's part of why it did, is because the mobile gaming audiences are like super wide audience, age groups, genders. nationalities.
It's pretty much anyone with a mobile phone, like that
Right.
can play whatever.
And I think that like those those type of games, interactive story type games or whatever, are like massively appealing because they have the mechanics of the game are pretty transparent. There's hardly any buttons. You have a pretty good understanding of like when you press one choice or another, you're going to branch the narrative one way or the other. Even if they have like behind the scenes mechanics, it's like you don't need to know them to play the game and succeed at it. And I think that it's like in some ways that style of game is like an extremely pure style of game. Like even puzzle games like Tetris have a certain like mechanical part to it that you have to like, okay, I know about games, I can play Tetris, but like story and interacting is like something grandma can do. That's unfair to grandma, but
so that's actually like a lot of what I think about is like there are more and more older folks like getting into gaming later in life now because it's so like everywhere ubiquitous. Like every piece of media mentions games. There's a game console or everywhere. Everything can play a game. And then now, like anyone can make a game, no matter how crappy your computer is or how little coding or art you know. And so it's like I think about like if I took this to like an elder, like if I like had a table at a powwow and was like selling comics and like I set up a laptop with like one of my games, like how accessible would this be to like someone who didn't grow up with video games in general, or like an elder who like didn't really interact with like computers much, or and it's like, do I want this experience accessible to them? Like, does it pertain to like how I want, what I want to do with myself and what with my art or whatever? And so like interactive fiction also like is interesting to me as like something adjacent to tabletop gaming, as also being like a general idea of like storytelling games, because they could like essentially be done verbally as well as like reading in like a lot of cases. Like you could just like read the story to someone and have them pick it and like do it aloud. Like if in a lot of cases, I feel.
I totally feel that. In fact, I think it's really interesting that like we talk about role-playing, like computer role-playing games, and they're all like highly mechanical games about fighting and exploring dangerous places. Whereas I feel like interactive fiction and visual novels is really a more clear evolution of tabletop role-playing games to me than like wizardry. You know what I'm saying? Like
I feel it's almost like not even necessarily like a part of an evolution, but just like another like part of like an ecosystem of like storytelling. Yeah. Because like being native, like we were primarily like a verbal culture. We didn't do like a lot of like Cherokee. We didn't really invent a writing system until like post contact. But like we had like storytelling games, and like that's a big thing I've been trying to research as of late is like storytelling games and like activities, because there were like cultures around the world with like intense like verbal traditions and verbal histories and stuff, like have storytelling games that are like essentially like proto interactive fiction, proto tabletop things where people would participate together and like add on to the story, or like kind of communicate what they would do in whatever situation. And like a lot of us, like even in like America, like as children kind of grew up with some of those. Like my fiance grew up with their grandma, like starting off where she'd say 3 sentences and then like my partner would have to like come up with the next 3 sentences and then they trade off. And that's even kind of like a layer to the like ecosystem of storytelling games.
Yeah, that's interesting. That I can see that. I don't know that much about it, but I could see it.
Yeah, like I guess I kind of see interactive fiction less as like where like some of them work when I've like approached them. It's like, okay, this was fun, but it could also work as just like a short story that I read on my phone or like in a book. But then some of them are like, oh, this works directly as an interactive fiction piece. It's not just that they're pacing, that like this has like very specific like elements that like in a sense could also be done verbally, and it's more about the interaction than just like the prose itself or the writing style.
Agreed. I feel like to me that's the version of the medium I'm more interested in. I mean, like rather than using it to present a story, using it where it makes the audience a super active participant in creating that story.
Yeah.
That stuff is the most interesting. And that's why tabletop role-playing games are so fascinating and so unique and have really not been emulated.
And they've like caught on so crazy over the last 10 years too. Like everyone's got someone they know who plays, if not D&D, some like weird offshoot tabletop or something, like, or Pathfinder,
Right. Yeah. And or somebody is making one. Everyone.
And then like back to that whole the 90s cartoonists and animators of like the like early Cartoon Network, early Nickelodeon, like post MTV craze when they were doing like Dexter's Lab and Ed, Edd n Eddy and all that. Like pretty much like every show of that era, and even going now to like Gravity Falls era, like they all had like a D&D episode basically.
Yeah.
Like Dexter's Lab has one, and it's like, yeah, and then like seeing that as a kid, like I knew what D&D was, and I was always interested in playing, but didn't have anyone like to play it with until I was like in my 20s. But like, I read a lot about tabletop games just because like I knew what they were through like the media around me, and then now it's like everywhere. Like everything is D&D or tabletop.
Right. Every KFC has a tabletop.
I feel like I used to have to, when I talk to people about it, have to be like, do you know what Dungeons and Dragons is? And now there's none of that anymore.
Oh, yeah,
well, see, my experience growing up was like you couldn't mention Dungeons and Dragons because it was like seen as like, Satan or whatever, like, like post-satanic panic,
right.
like early 90s, where it was like video games and Dungeons and Dragons and comics are the devil. Like,
my friend Jack Chick has told me a lot of things about Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, I got.
Oh man, I've read so many chick tracks like that I found just in the gutter in like Fresno and LA.
Oh my god, to see them in the wild, what a blessed life.
Yeah.
I never had that luxury.
I'm like lucky. I find a lot of like comics and scenes, chick tracks, and playing cards and trading cards in the street. Like I actually have like a collection of like Pokemon and Magic cards that I've just found in the gutter walking around. Like I have like a Klefki and like a ball toy or something, that like spinning top Pokemon, and like some like racist Native American wizard from like a Magic set that I was like,
yes.
well, I guess I'll hang on to it because it's like actually like a reference to my nation, even though it's like kind of offensive or whatever.
Those those ones that I wonder if they what they do with those. I mean, obviously they just redo the art, but I wonder if how playable are those cards? Do you show up at a tournament with them? You're like, the art is sketchy, but it's a really good card.
I would definitely have some fun at like the person's expense because like I don't know.
Yeah, I wonder how they're like. Do I? It's essential to my combo, but the art. Oh no, I can't use it.
I guess I feel like a lot of Magic art's kind of. I mean, it's way less true now. Actually, Magic art now I think is. I don't necessarily love it or anything, but I think they're definitely trying to have a lot more representation.
Yeah.
A lot more less offensive pictures of women, but like 10 years ago, there was still like, a lot of tiger women with big breasts and all that shit. So I feel like if you want to play Magic in some ways, like you gotta steel yourself to confronting that. And maybe it's not worth it. Maybe it is. I don't know.
That's kind of like a fantasy in general, and then like sci-fi too is like, especially if you get older and older, and it's like, well, how comfortable are you with saying like Frazetta or like Mobius, like weird fantasy drawings, like of like busty women with like swords riding, tigers or whatever, Like if you read like weird pulp stuff, you have to like brace yourself for like weird racisms and like whether you want to continue reading the story or not, or like and like old comics in general too.
Yeah, and I don't know. I don't judge. Maybe it's worth it. Maybe it's not. But I think you should know about it going in.
Yeah. And like there's usually something you can take away from like experiencing a media, whether it's like good or bad, or whether you like it or ultimately not. You probably learn something experiencing it.
Right.
Yeah.
And you can leave it at that.
Yeah, for sure.
And sometimes you're like, well,
or learn what not to do.
Right. Or it's like art is big and complicated, and you can enjoy parts of it while not enjoying other parts of it. And if that artist is long dead, well then, hey, it's not like they're getting you money or anything.
Yeah.
It
is in my mind a little hard to like write off, whatever. The last, art, except for everything aside from the last 5 years of art, write it all off and pretend it. It's really because it's
I'll leave it at like it's easier for me to like I'm more likely to approach Tezuka, like old Tezuka comics, despite his like crazy racism that people don't really mention.
Yeah.
Versus like Robert Crumb, where like I'm probably less likely to even care to like read anything. I might actually like thumb through a Tezuka thing. Despite like knowing both of their bagrowns,
Thumbing through a Tezuka thing is the right speed to read Tezuka, I think. I've read people like, oh, he's so good. And I'm like, this guy's. I just don't like his work very much. I think it's kind of like not great.
I think
it's more of like and place thing, I think.
Yeah, it feels very.
He has a lot of different stuff. Like,
Yeah.
he has some
That
stuff
is true,
that's targeted
too.
towards children. He has some stuff that's targeted towards adults, and like
I've tried it
some of
all.
Okay, I was like, some of it's a lot more readable.
Listen, I've tried Buddha, his opus.
Yeah,
And I'm
And
like,
then
this
there's
is,
like Phoenix or whatever too.
and I'm like,
I kind of like Phoenix, so
I saw
same.
I saw a full copy of Phoenix in the Beguiling for like $400 for the whole collection. But
I found out he did like a Western one that's called like I think Angel Gun or something, or like I kind of want to check that out. It has like a Native American like a gun character that's like not too racistly done. But on the flip side, he did like a story about Ishi, like a famous like old time Native American, and like he did it like super racist. So it's like
listen, I think his work is just hokey. I think the Tezuka Star
it's
System
very much
is very
like in the flavor of like Flesher and like early animation where it's kind of like post vaudeville, in a sense post minstrel show, and with a lot of its humor.
I think a lot of his contemporaries. I think Tatsumi and Mizuki are both like way better than him, and they are his contemporaries. But
I think like Leiji Matsumoto era, like old time manga is like when it's like really hitting a stride. Like I think Leiji Matsumoto is like the better, like when you want something out of Tezuka, I feel like Matsumoto maybe gives it to you if like Tezuka doesn't.
Yeah, I would far.
Like, I grew up.
Yeah.
Oh, go on.
I was gonna say
my thing's kind of cutting out, so like I don't mean to cut.
No, I would far more hand someone anything like any of his like the Harlock stuff before I would say here.
Yeah, I grew up like super loved watching Harlock. Like I still put on like weird, even the like was it like Harmony Gold like weird cut up dubs of Harlock with like that other story.
I gotta say, Leiji Matsumoto, I don't get it. I'll just throw that out there. I'll dissent. Whatever.
Wait, what'd you say?
I said I don't really get what. I don't really get the appeal of it. I feel like it's like
weird, wispy, like kind of like almost like poetic in visual, like fairy tale anime looking stuff. And then he did like a Daft Punk movie, like when their second album Discovery came out, he did like a whole movie that was like animated every song, and it was like a big deal. Interstellar 555.
I've seen that. Interstellar 555, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was like 4 or 5 or so. Yeah, I can't remember because he always does like Galaxy Express 39 and
Yeah.
Ideon Space.
I feel that people talk about like the fact that Leiji Matsumoto's kind of built this whole universe. All of his stories are set in this kind of same. But in my mind, I'm like, it's not.
Oh yeah, everything kind of interconnects or like drops a reference at some point where it's like, oh, this actually might be the same continuity or whatever. I love stuff like that.
It's kind of, to me, it's just like I feel like he's just got a distinctive visual style, and then his stories are kind of like, I don't know. They're like
some of them are really hit or miss, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more. I would say it relies stronger on vibes, but it's not as It's still readable. I think it's still quite readable, even if it is that kind of like. I feel the same way about like Kazuo Umez, where it's like good visuals, but like kind of not bad, but like very stilted writing,
See, the visuals are better than the writing.
Now you guys are like shitting on stuff. I'm kind of like, they don't like Phoenix? They think Leiji Matsumoto's better than Phoenix?
I haven't read.
I've never read. To be fair, I've never read Phoenix. In all the,
I was more into the Metropolis movie that they did.
That was great.
In the actual Tezuka Metropolis manga, and like also like I'm into like the old silent films and like was it like that whole era of like Dr. Caligari and like Metropolis like film. And so like I love like that's actually like a really like special thing to me is like finding that as a kid where I was like, whoa, they made an anime version of that, and then like watching that as like a 12 or 13-year-old, and then I don't know. Yeah, the Metropolis anime is like pretty good. It also is like the story, visuals, like content, like it's all like pretty great. The music, the vibe, the ending sequence.
That has aged well. That has aged well, I think. I think there's a lot of anime where you're like, you watch it when you're a teenager, and now you're like, why did I ever? But that's not Metropolis. Metropolis is still good.
I feel like it even influenced more things than people talk about. Like I feel like I definitely got Metropolis vibes from Kaiba. Like it felt like watching like a Metropolis flavored TV series, but just more whimsical and like free form.
And I definitely think those Kaiba character designs, they definitely, I think, look like Tezuka's art. I know. You guys
Oh yeah. They do have that like kind of like extra hyper cartoony, it's more abstract, super flat, like
Yeah, then a lot of their stuff is inspired by like the early like Western animation too, and that kind of like
yeah, Flesher and
and like
Disney
and
and
or
you
even like
know
later like Tex Avery style stuff where it's like
yeah, oh
this.
yeah, Chuck Jones and
which Tezuka, I think, I mean, that was big inspiration for him as well. So
Yeah,
it kind
but
of checks
and like
all in the
even
melting
those guys
all in
as
there.
like a comic artist and like interest in animating, like I even will like as bad as like a lot of Chuck Jones and Tex Avery stuff is, I'll still like pull some of it up and look at it like how they approach like minimal motion, minimal amount of animation to like get across an expression or whatever. Like some of that is actually like really honed in craft, but then it's like they do something crazy and dumb and racist, and you're like,
right,
oh, okay,
right.
next one.
It's like what are they like? Oh, this is very cool. If I just don't think about what the content of it is, sometimes.
Yeah, it's like having to approach something like from a scientific, almost like approaching your craft like a chemist or like a biologist, like from like a scientific or like an industrial way, like having to like just absorb the craft versus like the content or the like context in some
Yeah,
cases, and like taking what you can from it.
I think Andrew kind of summed it up pretty well when he said that, like,
Yeah,
hey, you can like part of it and not like the other part, and it's that's a fine approach to it. And
Yeah,
I agree.
I think it's easy to get caught in the modern online like all or nothing mentality.
Yeah,
yeah,
Where it's like I enjoy the Smiths, but I still think Morrissey's a shit, and that's like of mentality
yeah.
that I can maintain. You just don't talk about it
I actually
online.
hadn't heard that one, and I'm probably of the opposite mindset where I think Morrissey is more interesting than Smith as a whole.
Oh no, I can I don't like his. I do not like his. I think his solo stuff is fine. Do not like the man at all.
Oh yeah.
Um,
I maybe I don't know that much about him, but like as like
he's got a lot of stuff about people
weird gay
keeping to their
figure,
own
Irish
kind.
dude. Oh, okay, yeah.
He's got
Yeah, and it's like and it becomes complicated too because like cultural mindsets and whatever. So yeah.
he's not a great fellow. But
Yeah. I just know that like South America and Mexico like really love him. Like they even like made like a Marvel joke with Michael Pena about like because he did some like 90s or 2000 tour there and like connected with them with the like whole like colonization immigration thing because he's like
Yeah.
Irish, I guess, and like Ireland's still like dealing with colonization and like eugenics stuff, and
Right.
so but yeah, I don't know much about his like actual like what he spends like and yeah, a lot of people you're like, oh okay, well that's kind of gross, but at least this one album's kind of a jam.
Yeah, I like the guitar tones on these albums, and like
Yeah, and then
guess-
as in like an artist you can just take from it and
Like a lot of
don't.
a lot of creators. Like I feel like when you learn about any person, nobody's above reproach. So I just feel like I don't even worry about it. Like I don't even I don't even look up info about creators most of the time because it's like it's just gonna let you down. It's either not gonna be interesting or it's gonna disappoint you. So it's better not to know.
I've definitely found out that I've gotten more enjoyment over the years finding art like small audience people people that you could like end up still talking to on Twitter or like wind up on like a Discord thing like this or whatever, like I don't know, like it's I've met like a lot of artists on Twitter. Like when Twitter came about was like about when I started getting more into game dev and before diving more into comics, and so like I met like a ton of different people and I've like seen a lot of really interesting art and games and music and stuff, and like that has always touched me way more than anything that like a big studio or medium or even like a lot of indie studios like manage to put out like individual works, and then like being able to talk to the person even sometimes like casually is like really interesting.
Yeah, I think I don't necessarily know if I need to engage with the artist, but I do agree that there is something to be said for artists for art that's made by an individual or a couple people because it's like it definitely is like collaboration is really great and collaboration creates works that an individual can't create, but I feel like an individual is going to be able to like it's got that purity of vision. It's like tapping right into somebody's mind, and sometimes that sucks because the person's, it's people, the more input somebody has, the better something is. You iron off all the rough edges, but I guess that has to a little bit. We were talking about outsider art, which is kind of a gross term, but
Yeah.
We were talking about that earlier, and some of that's the appeal of that. I think you're like, wow, this is it. This is, this is unedited.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it's not even someone who hasn't, like, the term outsider art, like, it used to be like someone who wasn't exposed to art, who like didn't know or care or hasn't been formally trained, and now it's more like applied to just like people who understand there are like conventions or like cultural ideas of like what is good or bad art and just like don't care and are just doing their own thing. And a lot of times that gets labeled like naive art or outsider art or experimental art when it's just like people just like whatever doing my thing, like
Right. He was like, "Oh, you didn't choose to go down this our established marketable direction. Clearly, you don't know what you're doing."
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is like like definitely something like I've gone through different art phases, like
Yeah.
throughout my life, like I've done art and graphic design forever, and so like I've gone through phases where I was like drawing really serious like actiony stuff, and then like I kind of like stepped away, and over time like have decided to almost like loosen up and not care and just put pen to paper and not think too hard. And so now I'm doing this like really like hyper cartoony, hyper stylized, very geometric, just like not really caring that much. Like I'm more interested in like getting an interesting like frame layout or like camera angle than like how smooth my line work is, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, if you love framing so much, you should just make movies.
I used to in college and high school, like I would help out other people too if they had like film projects, and I have a mini DVD that I might get a new charging. I need like a charging cable and a new tape for it, but I've actually been thinking about just like trying to pick up like an actual like cassette camera, like because back in the day they had like it was like not high 8, it was like mini VHS, and then there was like normal VHS, and they had like camcorder, you put it on your eye and your shoulder or whatever, and you could walk around with the VHS, and like that actually sounds really interesting to me because I'm all about like weird analog. Like I went to college when I was like 15, and I mostly studied audio engineering, and like the focus, like I was like the instructor doing most of the courses was this like really old timer guy, and like everything was done on analog equipment. I just loved it and like fell in love with cassette tapes and like Indian VHS too. Not so much even as like a relic of my childhood or like of a bygone era, but just as like something functionally interesting. Like I mean, like if you want to make it simplified and like mystical, it's like magnets and waves, like making images, dance around in a box. But it's like, I don't know, conceptually interesting to me, and like all the artifacts that you get from recording on like an analog tape, even with a high-end like tape system.
Yeah, agreed. It's a different process. It's interesting because I think people look at it as nostalgia, and that's fair. It is pretty nostalgic, but I definitely think that you're kind of making a point that's kind of convincing me that like, yeah, but you could also just look at it as its own medium, regardless of the time period.
So like adjacent to that, there's like this hypnagogic pop thing, like lo-fi music, and it's like a lot of it is centered around like the bygone era nostalgia of like music that sounded when you were a kid and you heard something out of a car radio when you were walking around. And like I'm more interested in that, in it's like lo-fi and it softens the edges, and sometimes you lose so much fidelity that your brain is starting to fill in spots. And so it's like every once in a while you might hear like a song that's like a bad recording, or you didn't hear it quite well enough, and your brain filled in like instrumental parts that aren't actually there, or instruments that they didn't record. And like that's what's interesting to me, is almost like the parts where the fidelity has dropped so much and there's so many gaps in what you're like experiencing that your brain starts like procedurally filling it in. And that's like really interesting to me.
That is interesting. Yeah. It's like I guess that's the difference in some ways. That's the difference between like highly cartoony, stylized art, simplified art, and highly representational art. You look at art like that's a smiley face, and you're forced to fill in all the details. But you look at a photograph, it's all there.
Yeah.
Scott McCloud would be so proud.
I'm one of those people that like I'd go into my backyard or out in the street to figure into like the night time, like staring, even if it's not that bright outside, and just like kind of like wait and see what my brain tries to conjure up in the darkness. I don't know if like some people do that, or like I have like a hyperactive imagination, like really hyperactive pattern recognition, so like I can hear and see things like when I look at whatever, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of an interesting shape that my brain's conjuring up in the nothingness, or in the stucco on that wall or whatever.
You're a person that sees shapes in the clouds for sure.
And I recently realized that might have come from when I was a kid. I had this book. I think the artist's name was Ed Emberley. I recently tweeted about it, and it's like this book on like how to draw animals, and it's like basically breaking everything down into flat geometric shapes, half circles, triangles, lines, and
Yeah.
it's like the most shapes to do the most representation, like a very economy of line, economy of shape approach to like art, and like I forgot about it for like 20 years plus, and then I remembered it out of the blue like a couple of weeks ago, and I ordered like reprints of the books, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is kind of like my parents getting this and like handing it to me like as soon as I was born, like seeing the shapes and the patterns and everything and being able to like break it down and like turn it into something that's kind of like an approach that he like teaches, I guess, and did like a storybook. It's something called like The Wing of a Flea or something, and it's like basically a children's storybook about how to look around you and break things down into shapes to like parse easier and
Right.
potentially to make.
Well,
Yeah.
speaking of breaking things down to parse them easier, we're going to break this show down and parse it into a finished podcast because we are cresting our. We believe it or not, we've been here for 2 hours talking.
Oh boy.
So I try to cap these off around 2 hours to make them, I think, what people refer to as listenable.
We're past. We already screwed that up, but that's fine.
No.
Yeah.
I don't mean in terms of content. The content is always listenable. It's more like the length. When you see a 2 hour podcast, you're like, ugh, 2 hours.
Digestible chunks. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like when when you're getting into a movie podcast, and you're like, this episode's longer than the movie they're talking about.
Well, for me, it's like, is it a walk to the convenience store podcast, or is it a commute to the town over podcast?
Right.
Like,
Yes, and I try to keep these I try to keep them around 2. So I snuck my way in here. We're gonna close it down.
Okay.
Thank you both for
hey,
being
well,
here.
it's been fun chatting. It's
Yes.
we live in a time in the world where it's like you don't get to chat as much, but like you can do it online. And
Yeah,
it's pretty fun.
You can do
Yeah,
whatever
it's
you want.
nice to meet you too.
Yes.
Hey, yeah, nice to meet you too. And like, yeah, nice to see like zine culture is like staying alive in the digital age. Like,
Yeah.
if anything, it's like exploded more in the last like 3 or 4 years. Like, I've seen more zines now than I had ever seen in print in like the 90s or 2000s. Honestly,
Turns out when they're
everyone's like making a zine.
right, when you just make a PDF, it's a lot easier and cheaper.
Yeah. But it's like really cool because then it's like whether they're for a couple of bucks, you're like able to kind of put something out there and show it to people and like connect or distribute information or whatever you're doing.
Exactly.
Like I kind of self-publish like some comics right now. I'm trying to find like an agent for an actual like graphic novel pitch that like Neela Magruder just like helped me put together.
Yeah.
And but I have like a little like self-published comic kind of like teaser, Different Nourishment, and there's like a Tumblr, differentnourishment.tumblr.com.
Oh,
where you can,
perfect.
like,
You're
read some
you're segueing exactly into plugs where I want you to go.
I also have like if you go to lichenritual.com, LICHEN, I have like links to my like games and shops, and you can buy like a bundle of like all the 4 mini issues and like a bunch of music I made for it, bonus art.
Perfect. Thank you so much. You got where I wanted you to go without even having to get you there.
Oh, and one more. Oh yeah, your
Yes.
consignment shop. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
I'm selling a couple of things through the Pizza Pranks Indiepocalypse consignment shop, and it's pretty neat. And I'm really into that because I'm interested more in like seeing what kind of people like find are like gravitating to that in these like smaller events than just straight up trying to make cash or show it to people or whatever.
Someone had purchased a copy of Slime Grow Tarot.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. And I have like a digital tarot deck selling it through, the consignment, also on itch, like in ritual.itch.io or on my, like in ritual.com, coffee, whatever.
You did the thing. You made your own website. It has all your links on it. You did the smart thing to do, the practical thing, the thing I advise everyone else to do. Just make your own website.
I'm from like the old HTML era.
Yeah.
Like I used to have like a more fun site, but right now I'm just like, whatever. It's like a tree of links, like with a card or whatever. And
listen, it's your tree of links, okay? That's the important part.
I'm the lichen on the tree of links that are my whatever I'm making.
Perfectly said. Now, Willie Electric, what have you got to plug?
This is too embarrassing.
Well, then why'd you come on the show?
I don't know. I just wanted to hang out.
No.
You should read Choice Beat, the visual novel and interactive fiction zine. That's the shit that matters. I made some games, but who cares about it? Whatever.
Listen, if you found Choice Beat, that's the same place the games are. And what is that place where you can find those?
Wait, What loaded question are you asking me? I don't
I'm
follow
asking
that.
where you find your stuff.
Oh
Oh,
yeah, you should go. I have a website, andyhagen.com. AndyHagen.com. That's like my portfolio.
oh, perfect.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I want to do this thing where I remember to go and type people's things into the chat for people who are here now, but this is primarily an audio medium, so people who aren't here, whatever. Wait, how did you say that was spelled? What did I miss?
ANDIHAGEN.
Yep. Yes, that was my mistake. I did AN instead of GN.
That's common. .com.
I got that. Got it. Where am I? There's Twitch. I have a million things.
Now I'm checking. Like, does my link still work?
It all directs to the WordPress.
Yep,
WordPress.
perfect.
But perfect. So that's where you can find your stuff. Yes, get into like. You may be surprised to know that I think that small scale like independent curation I think is probably in our modern algorithm world is the future to art discovery. You know.
I've always like kind of grown up thinking that curation can be like an art in itself. I mean, like figuring out how to make the right playlist for a mood or an event or a group of people or video list or whatever. Like, yeah, curation is definitely like kind of its own art form.
Yeah, and the art form of choice speed is a great place to start if you're like, I want to find out. If you're like, I'm a really big fan of that KFC dating game, but what else are these visual novels all about?
Yeah. I've heard of a TOEFL boyfriend, but perfect. This is for you.
Yes, if you are an expert or a novice, ChoiceBeat. Do you have ChoiceBeat.com?
No, but I think it's choicebeat.wordpress.com. If you want to go straight to ChoiceBeat World.
Perfect. Speaking of people who own their own URLs, Indiepocalypse.com. I recommend you go there and purchase copies of the thing that I do called Indiepocalypse, which is a monthly. You know what it is. I presumably I assume everyone who finds this show knows what Indiepocalypse is. I would hope.
Oh wait. I almost forgot.
Yeah.
You gotta plug your Exquisite Corpse PS2
yes.
RPG 2 thing. Like, I don't have a PS2 or like a real TV I have good access to, or I'd be jumping on that because I miss like. Yeah, along with zine culture, like cassette trade culture was like a big thing, and like mail cassettes. Like, look that up, folks, if you're like too young or just were out of the loop. And this feels like that, where like everyone kind of contributes and you pass it around. Like, super cool project.
Yes,
jump on that, folks.
I love the Exquisite Corpse as an artistic practice.
Collaboration is so fun.
And this is what is that? If you just go to my website, one of the menu tabs it's called PS2 Exquisite Corpse. You go there, you can sign up, and we are making a game on because I wanted to have it a very closed and weird version of RPG Maker, so I picked RPG Maker 2 for the PS2.
No, this is beautiful. It's like constraint and collaboration and like physical medium being mailed around. It's like all these sweet spots of like weird old technology and what people wish like cyberpunk was or whatever.
Yeah, and so I don't know where that game is right now. It's floating around somewhere around the world. It's out of my hands. I did my part, as the Starship Trooper says. And now it is floating around somewhere, maybe in the U.S., maybe not. Who knows? But that's a very cool thing that I like. It
would be great if like chunks of it were in other languages or something.
Yes, I like
if you can input that in.
I like the idea of people just like different versions
having a Google
of it.
Translate segments.
Yes, I mean I originally got the idea from a group in Japan who did it with like who would collect old Famicom and Super Famicom carts and stuff like that of RPG Maker and like play them.
Oh yeah.
And see what games are on them.
It also kind of reminds me of like how VHS and cassette tapes, you can also like, if you know the trick, you can tape over any store-bought, big movie release tape or whatever, and kind of like put your own stuff in there and pass it around and just use that as like a blink medium. And sometimes there's like media bleed even, which is kind of fun. Just thinking of like passed around stuff.
Yeah, the only bot I follow on Twitter is one that actually I follow two bots, but one of them is post old home videos from the Internet Archive. Just like
that's kind of cool.
Just like small home video clips, and it's like these small like personal moments of just like people at like the lake or whatever. I don't know. I always like reminders that people have always been people.
It's scenes of like humility, scenes of like culture and like humanity. Those are like really nice touches that like a lot of people don't even realize like that's what they really want to see. Like even embedded in other types of media, like they want to know there's like humanity in there or whatever,
Yeah.
something to connect with.
Something beyond.
And just like mundanity, I think is like kind of underrated in some
Yes.
media, just like showing people living.
Yeah, I agree.
Before we get too sidetracked, Indiepocalypse, buy it. It's good. I like it. If you buy issue 26, like in here, we'll get some money eventually if enough people buy it.
Oh man, that would help so much. Trying to move, just lost my job and had a weird family situation.
Yes.
So,
And
definitely buy my stuff if you can. That would be cool.
Yes, I do not have the money to give, to everyone I can, but I'm trying my best to get everything around the most I can.
Also, looking for agents or publishers. I've got the graphic novel pitch. Email me. Emails on the website if you want to check it out.
Wherever you can. And then with that, we're going to close down the show. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here.
Yeah. See you all around. See you in the cyberspace.
Yes, maybe I will. Who knows? I will be on the West Coast maybe one day.
Oh yeah, I'm at least in the LA area mostly.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows where?
I might end up in Tulsa at the end of the year, but I might stick around LA. Who knows? Yeah, but
who knows where the event circuit will
so,
take me in these coming years?
Yeah.
But I'm gonna close this show off as I do every AMV nights that I've been doing for a little while. That my new unofficial outro song is another. It's Martin by Car Seat Headrest, my unofficial episode closer. Until I run out of AMVs by Car Seat Headrest, which is called Next Month, is when my supply runs dry. So everyone out there in AMV land, go out and make them. Make those turn bodies into a full-fledged song. A full-fledged AMV. I know you got it in you. Anyway, goodbye.
Yeah, Dona Dagahai. See you around next time.